All we've got to do now is to start pumping.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I am your host, Marcus Whitman, and I was tweeting about this last night, but I wrapped up last night my offensive lineman rankings, got through over 40 offensive linemen just yesterday. It was a total grind. It was like 14, 15 hours of work. I was just going all day. I wanted to get her done, and I did, which meant that I finished up my rankings for the offensive class of 2021, which is what this podcast is going to be about. I'm excited that I don't have to watch offensive lineman tape now for a while, because you get through 94 offensive linemen and you're ready for a little break. I'll just say that. But this podcast is going to be a deep look into the offensive class. And if you're listening to this in the audio version, you probably follow me on YouTube, but a lot of you are joining me on YouTube, which means you've been checking out my top 10 positional breakdowns for this class. We've done quarterback, receiver, tackle, and running back. Easy to forget those running backs, but I'm going to do the top 10 on the other two positions, tight end and interior offensive line, that I just am not going to have time to get top 10 positional breakdown videos done exclusively for before the NFL draft, because I still got to do corners, safeties, and interior defensive linemen. So we're going to do that. We're also going to look at my guys and my not my guys for the offensive side of the ball for this draft. Going to be a really fun show. But before we get started, I want to remind you that this channel is brought to you by my Patreon. It is patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you can support this show, this channel, but also get exclusive content. You get the full TFG Draft Insider package there. So you're going to get access to my comprehensive draft board. As I mentioned, 263 offensive players, graded, analyzed, ranked, you name it. All that on there, and the defensive side, of course. We're wrapping up that side of the ball. But you also get exclusive film breakdowns. We just did Greg Newsome last weekend, Northwestern corner. Probably going to do Rashad Bateman this weekend. And then you'll get access to my 7-round team-specific mock drafts as well. I just sampled what that looks like with my New York Jets 7-rounder on YouTube yesterday. So we're going to be doing every single team. I'm going to start recording those today. So again, patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. You'll get a ton of content. You'll support the channel. You can even submit questions to this show on Patreon. And then the benefits will continue to come as we go. It's not just a draft deal. So I encourage you to check it out. The ultimate dual threat, as I like to say. I'm really proud of the draft work going on there on Patreon this year. If you're into the NFL draft, I'm biased, but I really think it's a true bargain. So let's go ahead and get started. There was a little bit of news that I wanted to just top off at the start of the show here. So Bouye has gone ahead and signed with the Carolina Panthers. He's a veteran corner. He's been around the league. This is now his 4th team. But coming over from Denver, a little bit of a down year last year, but I think it was a little injury-ridden, a new system. Coming over to Carolina, I think is a really good scheme fit. They actually had a Rasul Douglas played a lot as their number 2 corner last year, and Bouye, simply put, he's just an upgrade to that. He's a better athlete. He's more accomplished. So I like the signing. They went and got Sam Darnold last week, and things are starting to trend back up for the Carolina Panthers, and I think they're going to have playoff expectations this year. Not that Bouye changes that, but I think the Darnold trade, they're hoping that works out and they continue to grow after not a great season last year, but they definitely, I think, exceeded expectations in a lot of ways with that young defense and some of those pieces on offense coming together really well. So I like the signing for Carolina. And then James Conner. A lot of fantasy football players very familiar with this football player. He's a running back from Pittsburgh, coming in on his 2nd NFL contract off that rookie deal. And he signed with the Arizona Cardinals. It's a good signing for them. A lot of people have asked me what my opinions on this are. I think he's going to be a short yardage guy, a goal line guy. If that offense is going to be good and explosive, as you would hope he's probably going to score a lot of touchdowns. I wouldn't be surprised if he's an 8-10 touchdown player. But I will say he lacks explosiveness. A couple years ago, Steelers fans were just absolutely pissed at me for not saying he was a top 10 running back. I love James Conner, and he's got a great story. He's a cancer survivor. But in reality, he's just not a particularly explosive running back. He doesn't have speed. He doesn't have a ton of shiftiness. It hurts his ability to kind of run routes and get open in the receiving game, though he is a good contributor in that receiving game. But just a good bounce back. He literally does everything as good as he possibly can. It's just those physical limitations. Good goal line back, going to score some touchdowns, but I do think that offense, as we've seen with Kenyon Drake, Chase Edmonds, they want a guy that can come out of shotgun, hit a B gap, an inside zone really hard, and potentially have some of that breakaway speed, catch a swing pass on a screen, be able to turn the corner, get the edge. He's not the ideal running back for that system, but I do believe that James Conner brings some much-needed character and toughness to this team. You add Rodney Hudson, James Conner, you're getting, and J.J. Watt, obviously. It's a pretty clear approach by this front office, honestly, that they want to be a more physically minded football team. Not that they're going to lean on James Conner or anything, but he brings an aspect to that team, which is really smart. That's what they've been lacking, and I like that approach. So that's some of the news, and now it is time to get into the draft talk. Let's start with the top 10 tight ends in the 2021 NFL Draft. And it's a good tight end class relative to like the last few years. It's not a great class. It's not an exciting class. Very few tight end classes as a whole are. But I would say that the top 4 tight ends on this list would be my number 1 tight end last year. My number 1 tight end last year was Bryson Hopkins, who I believe I had a straight-up third-round grade on him. My number 4 tight end on this list has a third-round grade, so maybe Bryson Hopkins would have been 4th. And we'll see how Hopkins turns out. He's going to get some opportunities this year for the Rams with Gerald Everett leaving. And, you had Adam Troutman was probably the best rookie tight end. Cole Kmet showed some flashes. Kind of beating myself up, honestly, that I lowered Adam Troutman after his 40 time came out. I originally had him as my number 1 tight end. I think he ended up 4th. But anyway, that's besides the point. We're talking about this year's draft class. It's top heavy, and just like most tight end classes, it drops off pretty quickly. But I will say I've got 3 sleepers on this list that I think you guys are going to enjoy hearing about because they're not guys that are being discussed really at all. Let's start with number 10, Trey McKitty. Pretty simple evaluation. I don't get very excited about McKitty. There was some pro day hype for him. I do think he looked like the best tight end kind of there. I think Hunter Long was there too, who's on this list, who's a better prospect. But Trey McKitty in Mobile kind of looked the part as an intriguing athlete. He's got like 11-inch hands, which show like he's really consistent catching the football. And he's a really good blocker coming out of Georgia. But he's a little undersized, and he's not a great athlete. He's got some straight line speed, but he's not like explosive or shifty. He's fine. He's going to be potentially a number 2 tight end in the NFL. Really good blocker. Comes in a little undersized at 6'4", 245. But that allows him to get some leverage in the run game. He's a hard blocker. So he's a fine player. I've got, a 5th to a 7th round grade on him. I think he can be a career tight end 2 type, but no one you're really excited about. Then number 9 is kind of the opposite. Tall dude, 6'7", Zach Davidson, who was completely buried on the listing here until the pro day came out. I think he jumped up from tight end 18, 17 on my list up here to number 9 after his pro day scores came out. Now, I was still kind of higher on him. You could see just off the small amount of film that I was able to get from him coming out of Central Missouri, you could see that he's a traitsy player. He's 6'7", extremely tall, but he's not like Tony Poljan or Dylan Shiner or Kerry Angeline in this class where they just can't move. Like, he can move. He can get open vertical. He can leap up for the football. He's a great red zone threat. And he's kind of similar to like a really young Jimmy Graham as that converted basketball player. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be Jimmy Graham, but I do think he has a chance to be a similar player. So let me just read his workout scores. a 4.64 40-yard dash, which is one of the top in this class. Now, he did have a 1.74 10-yard split, which is towards the bottom, which showed on tape. He's not like a short area explosive dude. He takes a while with those long legs to get up to that top speed, which I'll talk about some of those problems in a minute. But anyway, his 3-cone at 6'9" 3-cone, which that's a good time for a receiver or a cornerback. A 4.26 shuttle, which is, I think, the highest in this class as far as I can tell. Yeah, I think the shuttle time is the highest in this class. Broad jump, 117 inches, very good. And a 37.5-inch vertical, which, again, is tied for first in this class. So the dude has some real high-end athletic traits, which you want to gamble on at tight end because it's just hard to find. So 6'7", 245 pounds, 23, 24 years old, coming out of Central Missouri. Zach Davidson. He's a project. He's not ready to play, but you put him, as your tight end 3 or tight end 4. You maybe use him as a red zone threat, a third blocker, and you bring him along. I would love to see him go to, say, Detroit with Dan Campbell, who to me is the best tight ends coach in the world. So you put Zach Davidson with him, a compliment to TJ Hawkinson. Could be exciting. So just a traitsy player that should be on your radar. I mentioned a little bit of a slow starter, so he's not going to be George Kittle or Travis Kelce and be a great route runner and a true mismatch problem. But you line him up with that speed over the middle of the field. You can run him on a seam. He's a massive target who can outrun a linebacker going vertically. And with a 38-inch vertical, 6'7", that's where you get into some of the Jimmy Graham red zone stuff. Like, how do you truly cover that if he learns to use his arms well, maybe beat press at the line of scrimmage a little bit, and elevate for that football? So a lot of potential there with Zach Davidson. One of the more interesting players on this list, so someone we're going to probably spend more time on there than some of these other dudes. Pro Wells is my number 8 tight end here. So he's out of TCU, and he's a little bit of a late riser. So he's got that basketball background. I don't know if he played at TCU, but I think he was a high school basketball player. He may have played at TCU. But anyway, I know he has a basketball background. And I guess the best comparison for him, and this is a high comp, like this is best case scenario, would be Mo Alley Cox, who is a tight end who was a kind of a NCAA March Madness star, who came out of, VCU or something like that. And he came to the Colts and was a 2 or a 3 year project until he really broke out as of 2019. And he's been a good tight end for them. He is not a top 10 tight end in the NFL, but he's kind of an underrated player, outstanding ball skills. And what was the biggest deal for Mo Alley Cox was that he committed himself to the blocking aspect of it. And that's really the question with Pro Wells, because neither Mo Alley Cox or Pro Wells are burners. I think Pro Wells, he ran a 4.84. So they're not great straight line speed guys, but they can leap, they can box out, they're really well built. But as receivers, they're not true number one mismatch problems at tight end. So you kind of got to be a tight end too. You got to learn to block really well. And then you turn into a nice role player for your offense, which is exactly what Mo Alley Cox is. And I think Pro Wells has a chance to get there. He's kind of a late riser. He's got that career trajectory you look for. He beat out another NFL prospect on this list, Artavius Lynn, who got buried all the way down at 24 on this list because Pro Wells took that job by the horns. And Pro Wells, decent, interesting prospect, basketball background. But again, a 5th, 6th round pick and a project. Now we're starting to get a little more towards day one contributors here. And my next player here is a total sleeper. And I don't know if he's going to have a rise here in the next couple weeks, because it tends to happen when a guy truly does pop on film. Sometimes guys get, analysts start to watch these guys and the buzz starts to circulate. And it's possible that I just got into this tight end class a little earlier than other people. But anyway, this dude popped to me. Jack Stoll out of Nebraska. And the first thing I noticed with him was his get off, his willingness as a blocker, and honestly, he had some speed. And the problem with Jack Stoll is in his senior year at Nebraska, he lost his starting job basically because of injuries. He was battling some stuff. He was kind of in and out of the lineup. And by the time he got healthy by the end of the year, Nebraska's season was toast. It was a COVID year. And I believe, this is just kind of speculation, but it seemed to me that the Nebraska staff was like, Jack, you've had a nice career here, but we're going to play the younger dude. I think they have a sophomore or a junior behind him who they wanted to kind of get ready for next year, which I can't blame Nebraska, but it is what it is. And I ended up, after hearing that, going back to his 2019 tape where he was a full-time starter. He's just a really good tight end. He doesn't thrive as a receiver, but he's got some speed. And what do you know? He comes out at his pro day, runs a 4.68 40, a 1.64 10-yard split, and boom, there's some athleticism in there. So the eye test matches the physical traits, which you love to see. Doesn't always happen with NFL prospects. But I love that aspect of it. And most importantly, he's a hell of a blocker. He's one of the best blockers in this class. Even after I kind of tagged him as my number 7 tight end, as a sleeper in this class, I was going in and watching, it might have been Baron Browning or Pete Werner. Anyway, it was someone on the Ohio State defense. And what do you know? There's Jack Stoll in another game that I hadn't done, just blocking dudes out of the stadium. And I'm like, God, that guy can really play football. So a derailed collegiate career with injuries and COVID and the program at Nebraska being in a transition. But keep an eye on Jack Stoll as potentially even an undrafted free agent. I mean, this guy is not on the people's radar. When I looked at the consensus rankings, I think he was in the 20s, which is not a draftable tight end. So a total sleeper. But check out Jack Stoll. He can definitely play some football. I would vouch for him in the draft room. I've actually got a 5th round grade on him. I think he honestly has starter traits. He's 260 pounds. He's got good speed. It's not like he has terrible hands. He's not like a polished receiver or anything. But yeah, I think he's got a good chance to be a good NFL tight end. Maybe not a starter, but a good player. Then number 6 here, another huge sleeper. So Jack Stoll and Briley Moore are maybe top 5 sleepers for me in this class, just because these guys are just not on anybody's radar. Like, again, these are undrafted free agents in most people's eyes, and I've got them as 5th round players with starter upside. And Briley Moore, everyone's looking for that baby Gronk or the modern tight end that kind of does everything, where he run blocks, he's a beast after the catch, he can get open, he can come down with contested catches. That's what I saw in Briley Moore. I was really impressed. And again, just like Jack Stoll, I saw the speed on tape. I projected him to run a 4.85 though, because I was like, no one's talking about this dude. He's probably not an athlete. But I did see some separation and some toughness after the catch and some juice. And there you go. He runs 4.66 at his pro day. That's why he stands out. So both these guys, the athletic testing kind of matching to me what stood out when I was watching these two players, Briley Moore and Jack Stoll, compared to, your John Bates, Kerry Angeline, Quentin Morris, Nick Eubanks, this long list of just redshirt senior tight ends that don't have a lot of juice, that barely did anything in college. And these were the guys to me that was like, they stand out. So Briley Moore, like I said, he's got that baby Gronk profile where he kind of does everything. He is a badass as a blocker. He wants it. He wants to play that role, and he really wants it with the ball in his hands. He's a beast after the catch. So if you want like a guy that could be like last year's Adam Troutman, who kind of surprises some people, I think Briley Moore could be that guy. Now, the only knock here I will say is he actually weighed in at 240 after, I think it was listed at like 255. I can actually click right here on my draft board and get that link to his player bio. So let's see. I think it was listed a little heavier. Yeah, it was listed at 250 at Kansas State. So that could explain a little bit of the speed gap there, estimating him to run in the 4.8s, and he comes out, runs 4.6, dropping 10 pounds there. Maybe you want to meet in the middle there a little bit, give up a little bit of that speed for a little more of the toughness and that size. But regardless, I was really impressed by his tape. And not to mention, you never know what weight these guys actually play at. He could have been playing at 240. So I don't look too much into that, but it is a note. But yeah, Briley Moore, Jack Stoll, to me, big sleepers in this class. Then my number 5 tight end is Tommy Tremble, and he's Josiah DeGuara. That's who he is. A lot of Packers fans obviously know who Josiah DeGuara is, but a lot of draft geeks know who he is because he was kind of a reach for the Green Bay Packers. But that said, a team like the Packers who values blocking and flexibility at that tight end position, kind of looking at the Niners and trying to replicate that system, they saw a tight end with really good athleticism and outstanding blocking willingness and technique. That's Tommy Tremble in a nutshell. Now, Tremble might be a little bit of a better athlete, but that's my comp. He's 6'3", 240 pounds. He's kind of half fullback, H-back. He could potentially be as good as, say, who's the tight end for the Vikings? What's his name? Irv Smith. That might be like a high-end comp for him, who Irv has himself turned into a really good blocker and a vertical threat in the receiving game in that same system. So he's somewhere on the Josiah DeGuara, who we don't really know how good he's going to be yet, by the way, to Irv Smith spectrum. And I estimated him to run 4.6. He ran 4.65. He's just really good athlete, great blocker, incredibly underutilized in the receiving game, which is, he's unproven as a receiver. I wouldn't say he's like a great route runner or anything, but we've seen a George Kittle. We've seen lots of tight ends actually kind of be underutilized in college for whatever reason in the receiving game. Get to the NFL, the role changes, and then all of a sudden they show that they have really good traits as a receiver. So he is a bit of a, I don't want to say a boom or bust prospect. I think he's got a nice floor if used in the correct role. I would just say he has some fog of war because he was so underutilized in the receiving game. Hard to say for sure kind of how steady his hands are going to be, how much his route running is going to develop, how much of a consistent contested catch player can he be, and even like how great after the catch is he going to be. So there's some, I would just say, fog of war with his evaluation because we just didn't see him utilized a ton. He probably, I'm just kind of going off of deep memory here, but I think he only had like 20 catches in college. Maybe he had more than that, but yeah. That's Tommy Tremble in a nutshell. I've got a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him. I'm maybe a little bit lower on Tremble, but I like him as a player. I think he's going to be a good player in the right role. Then my number 4 tight end is Hunter Long, and this is a very simple evaluation. He is Kyle Rudolph to me, which sounds great, but honestly, Kyle Rudolph, without dogging on him because he's a good football player, but quite possibly one of the most overrated players of the decade, Kyle Rudolph. He's like a Pro Bowl MVP, which the casual fans are going to drool over. He catches touchdowns. He's constantly like a top 10 fantasy tight end because he's a stable option. Those touchdowns in fantasy football mean way more than pretty much anything else, especially at tight end. So that to me is Hunter Long. He is a tall, unathletic possession tight end. He's got extremely steady hands, contested catch galore, like he's going to box you out, come down with some tough catches, and he's a decent blocker, just like Kyle Rudolph. Now, he doesn't have a ton of like short area juice, which is a part of reason why Kyle Rudolph has struggled at times as a blocker because he's not a great athlete. At some point, to block someone in the NFL, yes, you got to be big and strong, but you also got to be able to get out of your stance quickly and arrive with some momentum. And in those short areas, a guy like Kyle Rudolph, Hunter Long, it's just going to be tough for them to be a dominant blocker like a George Kittle who flies off the ball, or a Tommy Tremble, who we just talked about, who can fly off the ball and come up and hit you like a fullback, basically. So, Hunter Long, he's a 3rd-round prospect for me. I mentioned he very well may have been the number 1 tight end in last year's class. I think he would have been right there with some of those other dudes at the top. But my number 3 tight end is Brevin Jordan, who my comparison for him is Jonnu Smith, though I'm not sure he's quite as athletic. Maybe Gerald Everett. Actually, I did. I changed it after his 40 time and his overall workout with the other splits. It just wasn't amazing, so I changed the comp from Jonnu Smith, who's a phenomenal athlete, to Gerald Everett, who is above average as an athlete. I would actually say Gerald Everett is a good to great athlete, whereas Jonnu Smith is more of a elite athlete at the tight end position. But anyway, Brevin Jordan, 6'3", 246 pounds, so is a little bit undersized, isn't going to be a true like Hunter Long. He's not going to be a guy that is a red zone threat necessarily, a true contested catch guy, but what he does bring to the table is the speed to run away from linebackers, and frankly, his best trait is run after catch ability. So put him in a similar situation to Jonnu Smith, or the way Gerald Everett is going to be used in Seattle in that Shanahan offense. I consistently mock him to Tennessee as a Jonnu Smith replacement. And the reason these guys work so well as those undersized guys in the Shanahan offense is, A, they typically are better blockers than you project, because they come in with leverage at 6'3", 6'4", and they fly off the ball, and they are really strong and thick and built. So as an underrated blocker in those sort of move block offenses, and then you pair that play action where you start getting a linebacker going the other way, and then you sneak that tight end back across his face. I don't care if you're Isaiah Simmons. If you get a guy that flies off the ball like Brevin Jordan, who can sneak out on those play actions, you're probably not catching up to Brevin Jordan. And then you get him open, you scheme him open like that, and look out after the catch, because Brevin Jordan will put a stiff arm on you, he'll run you over, he's fast. So really good tight end, a little bit scheme specific, kind of in that Irv Smith situation with Minnesota, who is in this system, Jonnu Smith, Gerald Everett, you name it. This is the archetype. Even Josiah DeGuara is kind of what Green Bay was looking for, even though Brevin Jordan is just a much more physically imposing prospect than like a Josiah DeGuara or a Tommy Tremble on this list. So I like him. I've got a second to a third round grade on him still. Now, he got shredded for his pro day. A 4.68 40 is still pretty good, and his split was 1.59, which is that the highest in this class? It is third in this class. So he still has a good first step. He accelerates quickly. Maybe the top speed isn't quite what you look for, but I still believe in the tape as him as a really good tight end prospect who would have been the best tight end in last year's class. Then my number 2 tight end is Pat Freiermuth, who's a polarizing player, a junior coming out. So a lot of people aren't in love with Pat Freiermuth because he didn't have a ton of production. And that's basically it. He got injured in his junior season, so he missed a lot of time. And he's a projection. But he's a very safe projection, in my opinion. He would have easily been the number 1 tight end last year. And I think he's kind of an underrated player. Now, some people really like him. Some people are probably higher on Pat Freiermuth than me, but probably not a lot. I'm pretty damn high on this player. So if you're looking for that baby Gronk, it's Pat Freiermuth. His blocking is exceptional. He has a really nice first step. So a lot of stuff we talked about with some of these slower tight ends maybe not being great blockers, I'm not worried about that with Pat Freiermuth. He's a willing blocker as well. He's got the size at 250 pounds. Now he lost a little weight. He was up at 260, and he moved really well at 260 pounds. I maybe like him even better at 250, where he might even be more athletic. So there's some fog of war here, and there's some projection with Pat Freiermuth. But the reality is, you don't find athletes like Pat Freiermuth at tight end, especially young ones. He's a junior. He's barely played football. Keep in mind, pretty much everyone on this list is a senior or a redshirt senior. It takes time for these guys, that a lot of them are receivers in high school. It takes a time for them to put on weight, learn how to block. It is very much a developmental position as a whole. Like, not a lot of tight ends come in as freshmen and dominate freshmen in college especially, but rookies in the NFL. It's a position that takes time to groom. So to get an athlete that was better on the field than any tight end on this list, because our number 1 tight end is not really, he is a tight end, but he's not a tight end. But as a true tight end, hand in the dirt consistently, Pat Freiermuth was the best tight end on this list as a junior. He's got the freaky athletic traits. Now, the production's not there. But you know who the production also wasn't there for? George Kittle. It wasn't there for other guys I like in the NFL as well, like Foster Moreau. And who's the guy in Buffalo that I like as well that's growing. He's coming along. Oh, man, what's his name? This is going to bother me. I'm going to look this up. Oh, gosh, what's his name? I loved him in that draft class, too. Knox. I found it before it came up on the screen. I did think about it. Dawson Knox. Anyway, you don't always have to have college production to project as a starting caliber NFL tight end. Now, Pat Freiermuth, to me, he has the upside of Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, to be that baby Gronk type of dude. I think he's a better blocker than Mark Andrews. And he's an athlete of the caliber of Travis Kelce. So definitely a high-end, high-potential tight end prospect. I was super impressed with his run-after-catch ability, his speed, his blocking ability. There's a lot to work with there already. I think he's a better prospect based on his college tape than Mark Andrews was. I can't really speak about Travis Kelce so much, but I really think he's a player that should go in the first round because you just don't find these traits and the willingness to block and the run after catch. Like, he is a physically minded, tough dude with the physical traits to complement it. I'm kind of glowing about Pat Freiermuth because a lot of people aren't in on him. Like Jags fans, for example, they constantly get mocked Pat Freiermuth at 25. I think that's what happens because their tight end coach went to Jacksonville. It's a glaring need. They have receivers. They need another weapon for Trevor Lawrence. Like, that's the spot. I really do think when I do my what I think happens mock draft right before the draft, Pat Freiermuth at 25 to Jacksonville is kind of the spot. And I love that fit for him. But Jags fans don't like that because they think they can get Pat Freiermuth with the 45th pick. You can't. You're not getting Pat Freiermuth. I think he goes in the first round. If not, he's not getting past, in my opinion, he's not getting past Jacksonville at 33. He's not getting past the Jets at 34 as a candidate. Even the Panthers at like 38 could use a tight end. He's going in the first 38 picks in the draft. I would bet my money on that. So there are people that are with me on that, but that's the sales pitch for people that don't think he belongs in the top 40, and I definitely think he does. I get that the production was not there, but tight end is a almost impossible position to find, and it's a position where you need to project growth. No tight end coming out of college is Rob Gronkowski. You got to grow them. You got to groom them. So the number one tight end is Kyle Pitts. No surprise there. Man, where do you even start with Kyle Pitts? He's an offensive weapon. He's a versatile weapon. He's more of a tight end, more of a receiver than a tight end. I think he played 91% of his snaps as a receiver. But it's fun to say that. It's fun to joke that he's not actually a tight end. But when he puts his hand in the dirt, he's a willing blocker. He can get in players' way. He has size. He's 245 pounds. It's not like he's 230 pounds and he's just going to get manhandled. Like, he's very slim, but he's very functionally strong. So he can block. I've got him with a D+ run blocking grade as a tight end. If you listed him as a receiver, he'd have A+ blocking, if that makes sense. Like, he is willing, strong, and long, and he gets off the ball quickly, and he can develop that a little bit. I wouldn't have him gain weight. I wouldn't have him go up to 255 pounds. I wouldn't play him as a full-time tight end. But he can do that. He can line up, put his hand in the dirt, and play tight end. But just like, say, Mike Gesicki for the Miami Dolphins, who played 9% of his snaps at tight end, which I think is almost identical to what Kyle Pitts did at Florida, that's the role. Slot receiver, outside receiver, and in certain packages, he will be kind of that second tight end. I don't know if they call that the H tight end, because I would need to look at a playbook, but and I should know that, so maybe I need to look that up. But the number 2 tight end who's kind of flexed off the line of scrimmage instead of putting his hand in the dirt as the guy next to the tight end, kind of that guy that's off the line as that kind of wing tight end, often in a 2-point stance, not a 3-point stance. That's where Kyle Pitts fits as a tight end. But man, just as a receiver, incredible. Like, a guy at 6'6", 245 pounds, he's one of the best route runners in this class, period, at receiver or tight end. He's got shake in his routes, especially like his ability to change direction when he's at full speed. It's better than most cornerbacks. Like, he has rare physical traits. He's smart. He's tough. He has the best hands in this class, period, even more than Jamar Chase. If he's double covered, you just high point it, and he has, a 40... I guess his vertical is only 33.5. I'm mixing him up with Jamar Chase, but he broke the wingspan record for an offensive player, a receiver or a tight end receiver. He broke the wingspan record. Like he has an 82-inch wingspan or something ridiculous, and it shows on tape. His ability to flip his hips and catch comebacks. I could go on and on and on about the different ways you can use Kyle Pitts. He is, to me, the best player in this class, or at least tied with Jamar Chase. I'm looking at my grade. I do. I currently have the highest grade in this class on Kyle Pitts, a 7.4. He's a blue chip prospect. I'm just glowing. He is unbelievable. There's no way he should get past 8 with the Carolina Panthers. If he's there, you got to grab him. I think Atlanta's a candidate to take him at 4. I'm not entirely ruling out the frickin' 49ers taking him at 3. You don't give up all that picks for a non-quarterback, but Jimmy Garoppolo could do just fine with those weapons and that offensive line. So I'm not even ruling him out. The Niners trading up for him and just doing all this quarterback stuff as kind of a disguise. I don't think it's likely, but I think there's a 1 or 2% chance that that's the case. I wouldn't rule him out to the Bengals at 5. I wouldn't rule him out to the Dolphins at 6, even though they have Mike Gesicki. You'd have to get really creative to work both those guys into your offense because they're almost identical roles. 7, Detroit. It's probably not going to happen unless someone traded up for him. But then Carolina at 8. You can't let this guy go. So he's not like other tight end prospects. He is an elite mismatch problem. And again, the best player in this draft class. I can't say enough about Kyle Pitts. So there's the top 10 tight ends, and I am going to clip this into a YouTube video. So if you are watching this video, please do hit that like button and come check out the podcast because we're about to talk about the top 10 interior offensive linemen in the class. But goodbye if you're watching this clip from the podcast. Let's get into the now top 10 interior offensive linemen. And it's a decent class. It's probably an average interior class relative to the last 3 years or whatever, but it doesn't mean there aren't good players here to talk about. But my number 10 interior offensive lineman, I'm not going to lie, I don't get that excited about. It's Trey Hill out of Georgia. He needs development. He plays a little bit out of control. I would say his kind of overall technique and quickness. It's just he's a young player. He's junior, coming out of Georgia. Plays out of control. He doesn't always find work, whether he's climbing to the second level. He can kind of get ahead of himself instead of sort of calculating angles and if they're running an outside zone and he clears that center and trying to climb up to the linebacker, he can just kind of sprint to that space. Maybe he'll let the guy behind him leave too early, and all of a sudden he gets there and the linebacker ran right past him because he wasn't looking. I just think that the game moves a little fast for him. I think part of that is his technique isn't amazing, but he's got the physical traits. The one kind of red flag with him is his testing numbers were terrible. I had to bump him down just a little bit because he flies off the ball on tape, which it's going to translate. You don't want to overreact to testing numbers, but at a certain point, in my mind, especially for a player that you are projecting as a guy that needs to develop, the ability to show up for a workout and put up good testing numbers, because for example, he ran a 5.46 40. He's faster than that. I know that. His tape tells me he's faster than that, a 1.87 10-yard split. But for a guy that I'm projecting that needs to kind of shift towards the technical growth aspects of the game and the attention to detail, especially if he's going to play center, where you have got to have attention to detail. I think there's a good chance he's actually better at guard. But anyway, there's something to be said, and the list goes on, an 8.293 cone, which is miserable, and only 17 bench reps. Come on, dude, you are quicker and stronger than that. And it's not like I'm reducing how I feel about his athletic traits, because maybe a little bit, but there is something to be said about respecting the process, understanding how to do these drills, like the literal technique of this thing. And he comes out and just shits the bed at his pro day. And that is a turnoff for me. It just is. Some people like to say, oh, these workout scores don't matter. And I would love to do a deep, like if I ever had the time to do a deep study into like the players that, let's just say their workouts underwhelmed. I would love to do a deep study of like the last 5 years. And maybe once I get like 5 years of really good draft boards put together, this is like my 4th year of it, I'll be able to do that. And just kind of see like guys that their pro days were underwhelming, let's just say, or their combine was underwhelming. What did that mean for their NFL success? It'd be a really interesting study, but at least as far as like my brain works, the way I process, the way I view this thing, if you don't come out with good technique, knowing the importance of these things and what they will mean for your wallet, your paycheck, and where you get drafted, to me it does speak a little bit to like the coachability aspect for a player that did not have great technique and needs to develop that. It is a turnoff for me. You don't want to overreact to it. That was a tangent. And like I said, that's kind of the only red flag there. But yeah, my number 10 interior offensive lineman is Trey Hill, who played center at Georgia, could be a center, could be a guard, a good athlete, and kind of a like physical specimen, but needs to kind of put it all together. Then we get Josh Myers out of Ohio State. And Myers is, what do I got, 3rd to a 4th round grade on him. He's fine. He's a decent athlete, decent strength. He's kind of good at everything. Doesn't have any standout traits. He's a good run blocker. He's really good at working up to the next level. Him and Wyatt Davis had some really nice combo blocks. I will say kind of the blitz recognition was hit or miss for him. I think he's a guy that does need to improve the mental side of things. I don't have a ton of notes on Josh Meyer, to be honest. I just know that I wasn't like wowed by him, but he was solid. He was steady. He's a good chance to be a starting caliber center or a guard in the NFL. No testing numbers for Josh Myers, by the way. Then my number 8 interior offensive lineman is someone I do get excited about, and that is Kendrick Green out of Illinois. And this dude has that, think if you draft Kendrick Green, you're going to be one of the 14 teams in the NFL now that runs the Shanahan offense. It's getting crazy how I'm going to go on another tangent here. If you go back like 2 years, a guy like Kendrick Green, you'd say he's a little undersized, although Kendrick Green might not be the greatest example, but there's a lot of linemen in this class like this who are great, amazing athletes with those elite move blocking skills. But anyway, 3-4 years ago, you'd say like, okay, the Rams, the Niners, and maybe the Vikings or Titans at the beginning of this thing. But most of the league was still running spread offense, pro-style offense, more power runs, inside zones. We are now up to, I heard a rumor that the Chargers with Joe Lombardi are going to be running the Shanahan wide zone offense. That makes it like 14, 15 offenses in the NFL now running the Shanahan offense, the wide zone, play action, stretch run offense. So a guy like Kendrick Green is going to go to one of those teams because those offenses are going to value him way more than, say, the Steelers or the Chiefs, who run a lot of inside, a lot of duo. That's not Kendrick Green. He's not a particularly strong player. He's got enough strength. But this dude flies off the ball. His ability to kind of climb to that second level, to get reach block accomplished, it's elite. It's exceptional. So he is, I got to pull up his... he's a junior coming out. He ran a 4.89 40, 1.69 split, which is better than any guard in this class other than one player that's going to be on my guys list at the end of this. But yeah, flies off the ball, elite specimen, good tape. He's not like an elite collegiate player, but was really solid. Does struggle with some of that play strength stuff. He's only 6'2", 305, so that is undersized. But he's got long arms, 32 and a quarter for a shorter guy. This guy gets me excited, especially in an offense like that. So if you are an offense that is replicating the Shanahan offense, or maybe even the Niners themselves, Kendrick Green in the 3rd round, Boom. Plug him in. Could start day one at guard. Now, my number 7 interior offensive lineman. So he's not one of my not my guys. I want to say that. It's Wyatt Davis out of Ohio State. Now, I don't always mock him in the second round when I do my mock drafts. So, like, relative to other people, I'm lower on Wyatt Davis. But it's not like I don't like him. It's not that I don't think he can be a star guard. I see it. Like, he has really exceptional traits. He's strong. He gets off the ball well. But when it comes to him as a pass protector, I'm just wildly underwhelmed. And after going through all these guys, Wyatt Davis, more than probably any guard on this list, he would just like let guys run past him. He struggled with like blitz and stunt recognition. And it's almost like he leans too much on his ability to just smack you, hold on, and that. Like, he can do that. He has exceptionally strong arms. He's got pop. And when he gets you, when he sticks you in pass protection, I got to credit Brandon Thorne. I heard this he was on the Athletic podcast today, and he was talking about Tevin Jenkins. And he said when he gets his hands on you, he puts you in a cage, which is a great example of what Wyatt Davis can do. But it's a question of just sort of the stunts and the blitz recognition. That's really all it is with Wyatt Davis, which is obviously very coachable. But when I watch Trey Smith, who's ahead of him here, who's going to be my next guard, and Vera Tucker and Ben Cleveland, who are going to be ahead of him, I didn't see that stuff. Those guys picked up the blitzes. They picked up the stunts. It wasn't like, I did 3 games on all these guys, and it wasn't like Wyatt Davis where I'm like, dude, that's your guy. Like, you can't stick with this defensive tackle that's slanted towards the outside. You got to see that stunt coming around the other side, and he's late to get there. So there's just a mental side of the game with Wyatt Davis that needs to get there. Honestly, the Ohio State offense as a whole, I almost blame the coaching staff because blitz pickup and stunt recognition and all that stuff, it shows up for Josh Myers, who I talked about, and it shows up for Justin Fields as a quarterback as well. It's like, do you practice blitzes, Ohio State? Because your star talent doesn't seem to be prepared for this stuff. So I think there's just a learning gap there. I think I would point it towards coaching at Ohio State, honestly, because you see it across the board with all these guys. And I know these guys are smart, so it's like, what's the problem here? That'd be my question with Wyatt Davis. It's just a slight knock on him relative to these other guards that I actually just like better. I just came away more impressed than Wyatt Davis. So, again, he's not on my not my guys list. I feel like I need to defend this because a lot of people are like, where the hell is Wyatt Davis in your second round mock drafts? And I would take him if the cards aligned. I've got a second to a third round grade on him, just as I do on my next guard here. But yeah, he's not one of my not my guys. I would take him. I think he's got great potential. He's got the 3rd highest potential in this class, in my opinion, and the 4th highest impact grade at guard. So I do like him. I think he's going to be successful. He just needs the right coaching to get him there, which is not something I would say about these other 3 guys at guard, true guard. So my number 6 interior offensive lineman here is going to be Trey Smith out of Tennessee, and he is fascinating. Now he's maybe even more boom or bust than Wyatt Davis, but the boom to me is even higher. His athletic traits are elite, and his game reminds me a little bit of, is it Braden Smith coming out of Auburn several years ago? Because he's a guard, but he's 6'5". He's got the arm length. He's actually got longer arms than Braden Smith. And he's an elite athlete. Like, he looks like he could play tackle more than some of the tackles in this class. Elite physical specimen. He was maybe the number 1 lineman in his college class. I know he was a really highly regarded commit. And I think he even transferred to Tennessee. Was that Cade Mays transferred from Georgia? Yeah, there was a transfer there between him and Cade Mays, who's in next year's class. Anyway, he was a high-end recruit, but in 2017... he had blood clots in his lungs, I think, and he had to miss the whole season, I think. But it was a serious medical concern with Trey Smith. Now he's since come back, But that's a medical check that he's going to need to clear, and he's one of these players where I've got a second to a third round grade on him. He could go in the 5th round, and it's easily explained that was a medical situation that teams didn't want to be a part of, and that could potentially keep him off the field. So he's got that big, ugly red cross next to his name on my draft board. So that is something to keep in mind. But as a player, as a guard, I love his game. I think he's the most powerful run blocker in this class, even more than Elijah Vera Tucker. Like, he flies off the ball, he hits you, and he has that. I'll steal another line from the Athletic podcast, so go check that out. I've used it twice now, so I feel like I need to promote them. It's a great podcast. Robert Mays is probably my favorite football analyst in the world, but he's got that. He's a dickhead, is what they said, and I love that in offensive linemen. I want guys that look like they enjoy the position that they play, because at the end of the day, it's a grueling position, and if you enjoy what you do, you're going to be passionate going to the film room. You're going to be excited to show up to practice, and you're going to be in the right mindset. And I believe that Trey Smith enjoys being a dickhead, and the way I like to describe it is beating the shit out of grown men for 3 hours. That's his job, and he takes pride in that being his job. So I really enjoy watching Trey Smith. He's got quick feet and strong, long arms and pass protection too. Like I said, he could be a tackle. He clears all of the athletic thresholds to kick out and play tackle. So keep an eye on a team doing that, just like they did with Braden Smith coming out of Auburn, who went in the 2nd round. So he's a super fun player to watch. I get more excited about Trey Smith than I do about Wyatt Davis. I think he's more athletic. I think he's more powerful. They're comparable in pass protection, but Trey Smith to me was more active with his kind of stunt recognition. He found work a lot better than Wyatt Davis. Like, if no one came in his gap, he's like, okay, who can I help? Who can I put on their ass? So Trey Smith gets me excited. I'm higher on him than most people, but you do have those medical checks to kind of worry about. Then my number 2 guard is Ben Cleveland out of Georgia. And if you go back to like February, when I first started to do these guys, might have even been January, I think I tweeted, I was like, am I crazy for having Ben Cleveland as my number 1 guard? Which he's now number 2. I was like, the dude, he's athletic. He has probably the best technique out of any of these guards. And I didn't see any problems in him, and I thought he had a higher upside than people were talking about. But people were like, no, you're crazy. There's no way he's better than Vera Tucker, Wyatt Davis. You're nuts. And as time's gone on, that's become more consensus. Now, I think people still have Wyatt Davis ahead of Ben Cleveland, but the fact of him being guard number 2 is certainly not crazy at this point. And again, kind of like when we talked about those tight ends, Jack Stoll and what's his name from Kansas State. Turns out that the speed and athleticism that I saw on tape backed up at his pro day, where he runs a 5.05, which is one of the best 40 yards in this class. It's better than Trey Smith ran. It's better than Vera Tucker ran. And I think it's better than Wyatt Davis would have ran. So he's athletic. He gets off the ball well. He is strong. He is big. He has quick feet. He 340 pounds, 6'6", almost 34-inch arms. Runs a 5.05. This dude's a freak. He's an absolute freak. And I'm still not convinced he isn't a better guard prospect than Elijah Vera Tucker is. So I think he's one of the sleepers in this class, to be honest. I currently have a true 2nd round grade on him. So to put it in perspective, Elijah Vera Tucker, who is currently my number 1 guard, I like the flexibility. He can play tackle. I think he has, we'll talk about Tucker soon, but I have a 6.44 on Ben Cleveland, 6.44 grade, and a 6.49 on Elijah Vera Tucker. So I think that gap is a lot closer than people are willing to talk about. I just realized as well that I totally skipped over my number 5 player on this list. So we're going to have to go backwards here because I was going down my guards list here. I got ahead of myself. But yeah, Ben Cleveland is actually number 4 on this list. I apologize for the confusion. I got to backtrack and talk about my number 5 interior offensive lineman. And when I skipped over him, a lot of you were probably like, I know TFG likes this guy, but holy shit, like what has gotten into him? But yeah, my number 5 interior offensive lineman here is Quinn Miners out of UW Whitewater, who, like Ben Cleveland, I have a second-round grade on, which is higher than most. And maybe I'm just buying into the hype here. And I was slow to the hype at the Senior Bowl, but I got there. His video of him, it's the combination of two things. Really a combination of three things. Number one, there's a video of him in the woods, basically looking like J.J. Watt, like lifting trees, working his ass off, getting in shape. At the offensive line position, that matters to me. You wanting to be a freak athlete matters to me. You putting in the time in the gym, because at the end of the day, this thing is about being a bigger, faster, stronger, tougher dude than the guy in front of you. We can dive into technique and all that stuff, and that stuff obviously matters, but at the end of the day, the best linemen in the NFL, they're gym rats. They're freak athletes. They take care of their body. They do the right diet. And Quinn Miners literally demonstrated that he's going to be that at the next level. And he backed it up with probably the most impressive workout of any offensive lineman in this class. Some of those tackles. Let's just say any interior offensive lineman in this class. A 4.96 40-yard dash. Good 10-yard split. 7.54 3-cone is well above average. A 4.58 shuttle, well above average. He comes out with a 111 broad jump, 32-inch vertical, and he did not bench, but you know what? I think I need to. Let me just do this on the fly. I think he said he was going to bench somewhere else. Let me just see if NFL Draft Scout, which is a great resource, let me just see if they have a bench for him. Because I'd be surprised if he didn't bench somewhere. I'm kind of doing some analysis on the fly here because I forgot that he was trying to. I think he did it somewhere. Trying to find it. I'm not finding anything about his bench press. I'm gonna have to further this look, but it doesn't change much for me. But I feel very good about this guy getting his ass in shape and translating from UW Whitewater, where his tape, it's just stupid. Like, he does exactly what you want to see from a Division III prospect with this athleticism at that level of competition. Dude, on the move, will bury dudes at that level. He is locked down and pass. Like, he was the perfect player. He played guard for UW Whitewater. Watching his tape was almost meaningless because he's just treating guys like rag dolls. But then you see him at the Senior Bowl doing some of that stuff. Now, there is going to be a learning curve on the field. And you could see that in flashes at the Senior Bowl. Like, learning what it's like to face Osa Odigizua on the inside, who has a lightning-quick first step. He's never seen that before. He's never seen anything like that at UW Whitewater. So kind of getting the footwork up to speed and learning how to land those punts. There is going to be a learning curve for sure. So I don't know if you want to start him day one. I think at guard in an outside zone system, he could absolutely start. Center he also needs to transition from guard to center. So, like, again, learning curve. But the work ethic that he has kind of put on display to get to the point where he's at now, being kind of a consensus day 2 pick with the testing number he showed, and just maybe I'm buying into the hype on the video. But I really believe in this player because I think he has the right mentality and the right work ethic and the right athletic traits. He's got 33.5-inch arms at 6'3". Like, that's no joke. Like, he's not just some tiny small school, guy from the woods. Like, he is a legitimate NFL prospect. So, with real high-end traits. So, I'm really buying in to Quinn Miners, who is my number 5 interior offensive lineman. Now, let's get into the top 3. So, Elijah Vera Tucker is actually my number 3 interior offensive lineman. And similar to Wyatt Davis, he's not my guy. I wouldn't say I don't feel like I'm lower on him. From my perspective, I think other people are a little too high on Elijah Vera Tucker. Like, I would draft him. I mock him consistently in the first round to the Minnesota Vikings after trading down. I think that'd be a home run pick. But he's not a fantastic athlete. He's a good NFL athlete, but he's not Ben Cleveland. He's not Trey Smith. He's not Wyatt Davis. He's not Quinn Miners. He's not some of these other centers here. He's a fine athlete. His get-off is good. Like, good, solid, super strong athlete with rock-solid, like, vice grips for arms. When he gets his hands on you, you ain't going anywhere. He puts you in a cage, just like Brandon Thorne said. I think he's a guard. He played tackle in his final year at USC. It was because Austin Jackson had left. They needed someone that could play there. He's a guard. Like, there's no question in my mind that I wouldn't even bother trying him at tackle. Now, it's nice that he has that versatility, but he's got 32-inch arms, 32 and 1/8. That is way below the 33-inch tackle threshold because length does matter for tackles. People like to think it's overrated, but if you look at the numbers, there's only a couple of tackles that started in the NFL that had under 33-inch arms. So it's a real thing. Like, length matters on the edge where there's all that space to work with and you're dealing with these long, impressive edge rushers. You got to be able to get your hands inside, and Elijah Vera Tucker at 32-inch arms is going to have difficulty doing that, especially when his foot speed is not elite. Like, if you have, let's just say, Rashawn Slater's a good example. So Rashawn Slater does have longer arms. Slater actually has 33-inch arms on the dot, but that's like right at the end of the threshold. But Slater compensates that with elite foot speed and ability to kind of, move with dudes. Vera Tucker doesn't have that. So he is a guard, absolutely, but I think he is currently the number one guard on my class. I think he's the best guard in this class. He could play tackle. He could slide outside in an event of injury or, if you were super desperate, but he is not a first-round player for me at tackle, like a lot of people say. There's no way in my mind, especially in this class. But at guard, he is the best guard in this class. Now, I think, I have a first to a second-round grade on him. I don't think he's a true first-round player. I have a 6.49 grade on him. So I'm just justifying why I'm a little bit lower on him, because I think, like, the gap between Ben Cleveland and Vera Tucker, or even Wyatt Davis and Vera Tucker, is just not that significant. I definitely feel better about Vera Tucker's like blitz recognition, his ability to find work, his footwork. Transferring from tackle to guard is nice. It's going to help him at guard. So just good all-around day one starter at guard. I don't think he has the highest potential at guard in this class. To me, he has the second best potential in this class. But you can make a case Ben Cleveland actually has better potential at guard. But yeah, he's a good overall player. I don't have any major knocks on him. I just don't glow and get excited about him the way some other people do. And I went back and watched him last night, and again, it was just like, he's steady, he's sturdy, he doesn't lose a ton, but doesn't dominate either. So that's the Elijah Vera Tucker ranking at 3. My number 2 interior offensive lineman is Landon Dickerson. My number 1 is Creed Humphrey. And these guys are neck and neck at this point. Dickerson keeps creeping up because his tape is so fun to watch. He's very similar to Ryan Jensen, who was is a center for the Bucs, and he just has that dickhead mentality, which is what Landon Dickerson has. Not just his last name. He plays like a dick. Super fun character. Was doing cartwheels in photo bombing of Mac Jones at his pro day. But that was actually kind of a smart move for Landon Dickerson because the dude's 6'6", 330 pounds, right? He's torn his ACL twice. He's coming off a torn ACL. So to get on the national spotlight and just kind of mess around doing cartwheels, which I can't do cartwheels at 6'6", 330 to do cartwheels, like that's showing some good kind of core strength and the fact that he's healthy. You ain't doing cartwheels on a torn ACL. So he's like, I'm healthy. I'm good to go. I love that. I think he has that kind of fun mentality, but he takes it seriously too. Like he has good technique. He will just punch you in the mouth. He's super physical. I would guess nobody had more pancakes in the NFL, pancake blocks, than Landon Dickerson. Super strong dude, and I feel very good about him. He's my number 2 center in this class. I'm not too worried about him recovering from the ACLs. It's modern medicine's amazing, but he does have that big ugly red cross next to him on the draft board. And then my number 1 center is Creed Humphrey, who's a little different. He's a little bit lighter, not a little bit, he's a lot lighter, but that does come with significantly better athleticism and move block ability. These guys are neck and neck. Like I said, I got a 6'5" on Creed Humphrey and a 6'6" on Landon Dickerson. So I think Dickerson's probably the safer prospect, to be honest, but I think Humphrey with that added mobility makes him available to more schemes to be an elite player, and just in general, the foot speed and the move block ability gives him a higher upside. But I will say, if you are the Pittsburgh Steelers or even like the Baltimore Ravens in the first round and you want to draft a center, I would understand taking Landon Dickerson because he is much more of a mauling inside zone power run type of dude. Whereas if you're a Shanahan offense and you want to run those wide gap offenses, or say you're the Chiefs and you want to run a ton of screens and get the guy on the move where he can get to spots and block on the run, then you're going Creed Humphrey. So it is a matter of preference, and it makes sense to me why some teams or fans of teams would have Dickerson as the number 1 center, because it adds up. If I am the Pittsburgh Steelers, Landon Dickerson would be a better option for me than Creed Humphrey. So way too often people don't take scheme fits into account, especially at offensive line. So I will say that. I love both these players. I have a first to a second round grade on both of them. Very similar grades, but different style players. So there are the top 10 interior offensive linemen. I'm going to take a little break, and then I'm going to come back and do my guys, my not my guys, and then we'll get into the Patreon mailbag. So now it is time to get into my guys and my not my guys. And again, I'm going to clip this thing up for the YouTube folks. So if you're just joining for this portion of the podcast, welcome in. But, this is a term that a lot of people use, but I'll just kind of explain what this means before we get started. So this is guys that basically I'd be pounding the table for in the NFL draft. If I was a scout in a draft room or a GM and needed to convince an owner, whatever the case may be, these are guys that I would probably end up drafting if it was in my control. And sometimes they're guys that I'm higher on. Sometimes they're guys that I just really like where they're valued. Sometimes they're guys that I was earlier on than other people. So it can fluctuate, but these are just like my favorite players. These are guys that I would probably end up drafting in certain spots if it was in my control. And vice versa for my not my guys. It's like these are guys that I'm probably going to let someone else get, that I don't see them valued where they're supposed to go, that they don't really excite me as much, and so on and so forth. Guys that I probably would not be drafting would be my not my guys. But my guys here, and I'm going to go position by position. At the quarterback spot, a little harder to find true my guys, but I think Zach Wilson kind of popped out to me. For one, I was just there in January, like the 7th of January. I was like, this guy's going second in the draft. He's clear-cut better than Justin Fields. Like, I'm in on Zach Wilson. I think he's closer to Trevor Lawrence than Justin Fields or Trey Lance. And, I still firmly believe that. And I'm putting him on as a my guys list. Other people are really high on Zach Wilson too. But similar to like what I did with Kyler Murray, I kind of called my shot, and it's worked out. So I think I've earned the right to put him on my guys list. And I'm going to keep him there. I think number 2 for the Jets. I'd even be thinking about him at number 1. I don't know if I'd pull the trigger on that or not. I'd be spending a lot of time thinking and probably overthinking it between Wilson and Lawrence at number 1. But I'm a big fan of Zach Wilson's game. And you can check out my quarterbacks rankings video up on YouTube if you want to see some further talk about him. And then I do have a couple kind of sleeper guys, probably guys that 5th, 6th, 7th round if we needed a backup, these are guys that I'd maybe take a shot on. So Shane Buechele is, I guess, my guy. I like his game. I think if you want a guy that could be the Gardner Minshew, the guy that has a good processor, is relatively accurate, can be really effective against zone defense where he just kind of understands where the ball needs to get to with a ton of experience and some decent mobility and pocket presence, Shane Buechele is the guy. My comp for him is Chase Daniel. I think he's going to be a really good backup in the NFL. Doesn't have the traits to be a starter. He doesn't need to be a starter. He's probably a 6th-round pick. But he would be kind of my quarterback that I would take if we needed a backup late in the draft. And then the other guy is like a total dart throw. I do have a priority free agent grade on him, but I think of all of the sort of non-draftable quarterbacks, the guy that I would really want to get into camp just to get a further look at him would be Brady Davis out of Illinois State. Really athletic dude. He's a shorter guy, but he can really zing it. He throws with weird arm angles. He's got a little bit of that it factor about him. Now, he has no processor. Like, this guy is first read, I'm either staring you down or I'm going to start improvising. Very Drew Lock-esque, very Jalen Hurts-esque. But Brady Davis, no freaking idea what he's doing at quarterback. But the traits compared to a lot of these other dudes, it's like, all right, he can run. He can really whip it. He's got decent accuracy. He actually made a ton of really impressive, like, dimes throwing out routes, like 20-yard outs, which you watch, say, Colin Hill, Peyton Ramsey, Zach Thomas, these undrafted quarterbacks, they ain't making those throws. So Brady Davis, super sleeper, but would be the guy that I want to get him in to be kind of that QB3 practice squad camp arm type, just to see maybe you can either scheme him up a little bit and use that arm talent, or maybe something clicks in his head and he starts to see the game a little better. Unlikely, but the physical traits certainly there. Maybe a guy that gets drafted because of his arm talent. And then, let's stick with the my guys, and then we'll do not my guys with the quarterback. But now we have running backs. Got 5 guys on my list. So Kenneth Gainwell is definitely one of my guys. He's QB running back 4 for me. I've seen him anywhere from 5 to 9. I don't know if I've seen anyone with Kenneth Gainwell as RB4. I just love the explosiveness. He would be ideal in an outside zone offense. But think like Austin Eckler is my comp for him. And I'll just stand by it. Like, he is a phenomenal receiver. You don't see guys with the hands, the route running, the confidence as a receiver, but he's good as a runner too. He's very inexperienced. He's been a part of a rotation there, but very efficient as a runner. High-end speed, runs through arm tackles. I think he's got underrated vision and is just really strong for a guy that's literally Austin Eckler's size, which is a big part of Eckler's game, is not just the ability to run through arm tackles as a runner, but it helps you in the receiving game to fight through traffic and use your arms to kind of come down with some tougher catches. So, big fan of Kenneth Gainwell's game. Not a guy that's probably ever going to be an elite running back, but I think he can be an elite receiving back and be a solid running back, like Austin Eckler. Then I have both Javian Hawkins and Puka Williams. So, I did the Puka Williams at number 10 on my top 10 running backs list that I put out 2 weeks ago. And completely off my radar was Javian Hawkins, who is almost identical. I mean, they're both right there at, let's see, what are these guys' heights respectively? So Javian Hawkins has actually slid up to my number 10 running back. Technically 11 because I slid Demetric Felton over to running back from receiver. So Puka moving down a little bit, down to 12. But I still love Puka Williams, Javian Hawkins. Puka Williams is 5'9", 175 pounds. Javian Hawkins is 5'8", 183 pounds. So Hawkins a little bit more sturdy, and these guys are like identical. It's weird how spot on these guys' grades are. Let me read off they both ran a 4.46 40 time. Hawkins had a 1.53 10-yard split. Puka Williams had a 1.54 10-yard split. Javian Hawkins had a 6.95 3-cone. Puka Williams had a 7.03 3-cone. Those are, like, that is literally almost an identical time. And then their shuttle time, 4.25 shuttle for Javian Hawkins, 4.26 shuttle for Puka Williams. The broad jump, 116 inches for Javian Hawkins, 118 inches for Puka Williams. Vertical jump, 36 for Javian Hawkins, 32 for Puka Williams. And then they both I gave a Nyheim Hines comp to. So you get the point. These guys are great athletes. They're undersized, but excellent receivers. Guys that have underrated vision, shake ability to run through arm tackles. Tougher runners for smaller guys. Highly efficient, underutilized collegiate players, or at least guys that don't have a lot of tread on the tires. The beauty is here, you can wait. If you like both these guys, you can wait till one comes off the board and then take the other if it's a little early. These guys are literally like the same guys. It's pretty crazy. Hawkins maybe a little bit shiftier. Puka Williams maybe a little bit better vision, less shiftiness. But, man, I like both these players a ton. 4th to 5th round grades on both of them. And you can go see what I said about Puka Williams in my top 10 running backs video. Then we're getting deep here. So actually my number 17 running back is a running back out of UAB by the name of Spencer Brown. And he reminds me so much of James Robinson coming out last year. And I liked James Robinson's tape coming out of Northern Illinois. It wasn't even Northern Illinois. It was a small school. Illinois State, I think. But I knocked him because he didn't have elite speed, which you like to see from like smaller level of competition to say he's going to translate to the next level. But he also had like 1,000 career carries, but was uber productive with those carries. Had like over 4,000 yards and was a really good contact balance player. And obviously James Robinson came in and was quite possibly the best rookie running back. And Spencer Brown is eerily familiar, like from play style to physical size and speed. The testing numbers, if you run the comparisons, it's like it's bizarre. Both these guys had over 4,000 yards, were 4-year starters, ran into the dirt at small programs, but were really productive. It's all about opportunity for a guy like Spencer Brown. He could be an undrafted free agent that never gets an opportunity. But he runs just like him, very eerily familiar to James Robinson, who a lot of you guys remember I told people when I looked at the Jags, I was like, Leonard Fournette's going to get cut because he's just not working out there. And then I looked at their depth chart, I was like, well, they have that one random scat back that they took out of like Temple from a couple years ago. He stinks. And then James Robinson, who ran for 4,500 yards in college, was an undrafted free agent. I told you guys on this podcast, I was like, pick up James Robinson. And he probably won you some leagues. So Spencer Brown, similar thing. He might not ever get an opportunity, and he might not be as good as James Robinson. But as an evaluation, he is almost an identical player to James Robinson. And I'm much higher on him. I have a 5th to a priority free agent grade on him. He's my 17th running back, and I really like him. And then the last sort of my guy here, and this would be probably as either a 7th round pick. I do have a 6th round to a priority grade on him. But he'd probably be available as a 7th round pick to get the 4-year contract or as a priority free agent pickup. And it's B.J. Emmons out of FAU. And I loaded up his tape and instantly I was like, what the heck? This dude does not look like any of these other bottom 30 running backs that I'm evaluating right now. Like, he is explosive, he's shifty, he's big. And then sure enough, I go and find out who this dude is. He was the number 1 running back coming out of high school, and he went to Alabama. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. But what the hell happened? How did we end up at FAU as a transferred senior 5th year? And it's injuries. I didn't see anything about, like, got kicked out of Alabama. Like, a lot of times these guys go the community college route, then they end up at a school like FAU, who They are kind of like the last chance U pipeline in college football right now. So maybe there was like academic issues. He couldn't stay on the team at Alabama. I didn't see any of that. I'm not going to assume any of that, but his like path would say that's kind of what happened. Usually the number one recruit at Alabama doesn't just leave, but it's possible that because of the injuries and the talent there that he was like, I'm just going to go a different route. So he has a medical red flag and a potential kind of just red flag in general, like what happened here? Why did it not work out? But on tape, you can see the talent. Reminds me a ton of Isaiah Crowell, who had a nice career as a starting caliber running back for the Browns. The Raiders gave him a new contract. He wasn't able to stay healthy there. But Isaiah Crowell was like a 5-star prospect that kind of went the community college route and eventually got into the league. And B.J. Emmons, to me, he's had all of his seasons derailed for like ankle injuries, which you would guess is probably going to stay with him. But just in case it doesn't, why not spend a meaningless 7th-round pick or a priority free agent pickup to get him in the building and just see if he can stay healthy? Because I know he can play football. So he is an interesting, like, deep sleeper in this class. B.J. Emmons out of FAU, former Alabama, number 1 running back commit in his class. I wrote in his player blurb on my draft board that in a different universe where he stays healthy, he was Josh Jacobs, because they're like identical physical players. And his tape, honestly, he doesn't get the blocking at FAU he got at Alabama. I'll just say that. But I like his game. I think he can be a good player. He's got all of the NFL traits. So then at wide receiver, Tylan Wallace, one of my dudes. He's come down a little bit. I've got him at wide receiver number 9 now, after having him all the way up at like 6 when I did my top 10 receivers. But I still love him as a surefire 2nd-round pick. He is a number 2 receiver. He's never going to be a number 1, but a vertical threat, super tough dude, can run slants, kind of, comebacks, hitches, a true perimeter number 2 receiver, a reliable target who can get open, a reliable pair of hands, is a good run blocker. I feel incredibly safe when I draft Tylan Wallace that he's going to be a good starter for me at wide receiver. Doesn't have the upside of a Diami Brown or Seth Williams or Tamorian Terry, but just feel incredibly stable about what he's going to give me. Some people have him as a 3rd-round receiver, and I just think he's a 2nd-round player to me. Then Jalen Darden, one of my dudes. Both these guys in my top 10 receiver video, so I'm not going to get redundant there. But Jalen Darden is just elite short area juice. Like, he makes dudes miss. He has speed to get vertical. He's a great route runner. Love his game. I did put Diami Brown on here only because I was really early to the game on Diami Brown. I was tweeting about him in like January, and he's only just now getting hype as like a lock 2nd-round pick. And I'm actually behind the hype at this point. I don't even know if I'd be able to get Diami Brown at this point based on my evaluations. I still have a 2nd to a 3rd-round grade on him. He's my number 11 receiver, but he's like a consensus top 10 guy all of a sudden. He's super, super talented deep threat. He's a young guy. But I tweeted in like January, like, I don't know. I think I said I haven't heard of this guy yet, but I just looked at Diami Brown. I'm getting some serious Chris Godwin vibes. So I love Diami Brown. I would love to draft him, but I still like a lot of other receivers in this class. So I don't know if I'd be able to draft Diami Brown at like the end of the 2nd round, which is kind of where I'm starting to think about him, based on the way people are talking about. Like, someone had him was it Chris Sims? Someone had him as like a 1st-round pick. I'm like, no, I can't match that hype. But I still was early to the game on him, and I absolutely love his game. I think he has a chance to be a star receiver. So I wish I could say that he is a sleeper and a total my guy, and anyone would be happy to get him in the 2nd round. There's a chance where someone takes him a little bit too early, and the expectations just get a little bit higher than I can match. But still, I wanted to put him on my guy list because I felt like I was way ahead of the game on Diami Brown. Then I put Austin Watkins on this list. I didn't have him on the list until I looked at the consensus rankings on the internet. He was in like the 40s. And I have since moved him down because he ran a 4.56 40, which it's concerning. I will say with Austin Watkins, his tape, his Senior Bowl performance, you could tell he's a slow starter, but he's quick. He's quick, and when he gets his top speed, he stacks corners, and he can change directions really well. So he's kind of a unique physical player, but I've got a 4th-round grade on him. He's currently a number 22 receiver, but like consensus rankings has this guy as like a 7th-round pick, undrafted player. I disagree with that. He's got great ball skills. He runs really good routes, vertically speaking. I think he can be a vertical presence in the NFL, similar to a Gabriel Davis. And I think he's faster than his 4.56 40 time. I just think that the slow start and him coming out of a stance was maybe difficult for him physically speaking, because that's not really his game, is that suddenness. He's more of a long developing vertical threat, so it does make some sense, but there is something to a lack of elite speed there running a 4.56. Then we have Simi Fehoko. I was also surprised to see that he was in the 30s in the consensus rankings. I have a 3rd to a 4th-round grade on him. I think he has a chance to be Chase Claypool, almost identical physically speaking, not quite as heavy, but 6'4", 222 pounds. He ran a 4.44 40. He's got a really lightning quick first step. He's got excellent ball skills. Coming out of Stanford, a little bit underutilized until the end of his career. His final game of his career, I think he had 22 targets and dominated against UCLA. A really fascinating player. He can do a little bit of slot work, a little bit of receiver. He could even put on a little bit of weight and play like tight end. Interesting, moldable, freak athlete of a prospect. Then the last guy on this list, I am a big fan of. This is definitely a true sleeper because he was in like the 40s and 50s of the consensus rankings. Nobody's talking about this guy. Definitely one of my guys. Blake Prohl out of ECU. And I think there's a little bit of, let's just call it what it is. There's the bias of him being his brother, Austin Prohl, who's the prototype, not even bias, just like assumption, really, that he's Austin Prohl. He's a typical slot receiver. He's quick, not fast. He's a slot dude. There's not a lot of upside there. That is not his game at all. If you want to play the white receiver card, he's much more Adam Thielen than he is his brother, Austin Prohl. So Blake Prohl he's 6 foot, 186, which he's much similar to, he's a lot more similar to like Dyami Brown, for example, than I think he gets credit for. Now, I like Dyami Brown way more as a prospect, but physically speaking, 6 foot, 186, and play style very similar. He ran 4.47 40, Dyami Brown 4.45. Let's just do this experiment. So 40 times similar. 10-yard split, Dyami Brown 1.57, Blake Prohl 1.55. 3-cone drill. Dyami Brown ran a 6.85. Blake Prohl ran a 7.0. Both excellent 3-cone times. 20-yard shuttle. Dyami Brown ran a 4.35, and Blake Prohl ran a 4.22. Broad jump. Dyami Brown does have him pretty significantly with a 1.28, whereas Blake Prohl, I lied. Blake Prohl had a 1.26 broad jump. They are very similar there. Vertical jump, 35.5 for Dyami Brown, 36 for Blake Prohl. So physically speaking, they are very similar. Brown's a little bit faster, a little bit quicker, a little bit taller, but like by a teeny tiny margin. So his game is similar. He has a good release. He runs great routes. He attacks the football very similarly to Dyami Brown. He will elevate. He hands fights well. Underrated player. He caught everything. That's one of the best things about Blake Prohl. He actually has, tied with Devontae Smith, the highest catch grade in this class. His hands were remarkably steady. If he's open, he ain't dropping it. He had 2 drops on 194 targets. That is the best drop rate in this class of 1%. Less than 1%. 2 out of 194. Actually, that might be just over 1. I don't know. 2 out of 194. 1%. dropped. Like, he has incredibly secure hands. And he had proved all he needed to show at ECU. He is a redshirt junior. He could have come back for another year. He's like, I'm good. I've shown all I need to see. I've dominated my level of competition. I'm a better athlete than people give credit for. And I'm going to be a much better football player than my brother. So nobody's talking about Blake Proehl. I get excited about him. And he elevates for the football really well. Like, that's an underrated trait for receivers. Instead of kind of being scared and like protecting your body, staying on the ground and just reaching for it, he's like, screw it. I'm going to attack this thing in the air. Which reminds me of the great Vikings offense of like 2 years ago with Thielen and Diggs. Both did that. And it was like unstoppable. They just started leaping at the football constantly because Case Keenum wasn't exactly throwing it on the dot. But Proehl does it. Now, there's injury risk there. He could land funny. He's got skinny legs. But the dude is quick. He runs good route. There's very little not to like about Blake Proehl, other than his brother is a much worse football player. So he's definitely one of my guys. I have a 5th-round grade on him. He's my number 23 receiver. I've got him way ahead of a ton of receivers that people think are much better players. And he is definitely a guy I would end up drafting in this class. Then at tight end, we kind of did that, but it's Briley Moore out of Kansas State, Jack Stoll, and Zach Davidson. We're all in my top 10 list. They're all my guys. I would probably end up with those dudes because they are basically undrafted free agents in most people's eyes. Then I'll do offensive tackle, where I have Tevin Jenkins. He's like everyone's guy. He's just such a likable prospect, but I wanted him on this list because I'm absolutely in love with Tevin Jenkins, and I wasn't going to settle by not putting him on there, even if everybody would put him on their list. But I was a little bit earlier to the game on Tevin Jenkins, so I'll take a tiny little W flag there. But regardless, like who doesn't love Tevin Jenkins? I needed him on my list. Probably one of the most. With that said, I would say Rashad Bateman on the receiver list too. Like Rashad Bateman and Tevin Jenkins are two of my just favorite players in this class. But everyone likes, seemingly everyone likes those guys. Walker Little makes my list. Offensive tackle out of Stanford. Another little mini topic that I might sneak into a podcast here before the draft is sort of the COVID opt-out sleepers, guys that basically are falling under the radar because they didn't play last year, but guys that I think more likely than not would have had spectacular seasons had they played. So Walker Little was a top 10 tackle prospect in 2018. Was viewed as like a top 10 pick and all that. 2019, tears his ACL after the first game of the year, misses that entire season, but was good. He was good when he was out there. And fully has had 2 years to recover from one ACL. Like we talk about Landon Dickerson, he's torn his ACL twice. And there's way less concerns about his injury than Walker Little. I think people, their brains have a disconnect between the injury and the opt-out, right? The ACL, who in the NFL hasn't torn an ACL? I bet it's like 25% of the NFL players have torn an ACL at some point. I don't have the numbers to support that, but at some point in their career, I bet it's pretty high. And Walker Little had it at an unfortunate time. And then he opts out of the 2020 season because he's like, people know I can ball. Like, I've graded out well. I have the traits. I was a high prospect coming out. Like, I'm a bigger dude. I don't want to mess around with COVID. The Pac-12 in general was extremely conservative with this thing. He didn't know if he was going to get a season. He's like, I ain't going to mess around with this. I don't need to play. But he was healthy the whole time. He could have started day one at Stanford in 2020. Health, I don't have a medical red flag on Walker Little. He's fine. He's an ACL injury. He's just fine. So there's that. And his tape is, you got to go back to like his freshman year to really watch him. But I do believe that he's going to be just fine as a tackle prospect. I think you're getting a potential top, this class is different because the tackle class is so good. But like 2 years ago, he was a potential top 10 tackle prospect in the lights of like Ronnie Stanley would be a decent example. So Yeah, he might have a little bit of growth. He's a little bit behind the curve because he hasn't played in 2 years. But he, to me, is someone you could take in the top 35 picks of this draft and could be a total steal. And then another sleeper here that I discovered yesterday that I was tweeting about is Teton maybe? Saltes? Out of, I don't even remember what his school was. Was it Fresno State? Where is he here? Let me confirm what his state is. What his school is. Teton Saltes is a tackle, and he's from New Mexico. Super fun watch. Super fun watch. He's got long hair, but pops off the ball, like flies off the ball. Another player where I watched him, and then the combine or the pro day scores backed up his athleticism. So a super athlete, a little bit on the lighter side, but he's got really strong arms. So I'm not too worried about his play strength. And the other thing is he actually could be a really good guard prospect, even though he played tackle. He's kind of on the fringe there. He's 6'5", 300 with 32 and 7/8 inch arms. Typically 33 inches is the cutoff for arm length. So probably a guard, to be completely honest, but he could be a hell of a guard. And he is one of the few players in this class with like Tevin Jenkins. We talked about Trey Smith, Quinn Miners, Landon Dickerson. He's in that category of dudes that love his job. He wants to line up and smack you. He's going to find people to hit in space as a pass protector. If he doesn't find work, which if he moves to guard will really translate well. If he doesn't have an assignment, he's going to go hit someone. He's not going to just stand there and do what 90% of linemen do. Be like, this is my gap. Just kind of waiting for someone to come here. He's like, nope, I'm going to go help out my center and knock this dude on his ass. And after I do that, I'm going to go help out my tackle. Like, that's Teton Saltes in a nutshell. Nobody's talking about this dude. I haven't heard his name once. He was like 43rd on my tackle board before I got to his eval. Really fun player. I've got a 5th to a 6th round grade on him. Again, probably a guard. He's got the athleticism to play tackle, especially in like a wide zone offense. But athletic, really good run blocker. The technique as a pass protector needs work, so he's not like a perfect prospect. But again, that might be why the guard transition makes sense. Little light, but for the most part, really fun player. And to get him in the 5th or the 6th round, I think you're just stealing athletic upside and a dude that's going to want it at the next level. So those are my guys. Interior offensive line, I actually have some guys as well. So Ben Cleveland, I talked about him earlier in the show. Kendrick Green, we talked about him earlier in the show. Those would probably be the guards that I end up drafting based on where they're going to be available and how highly I am on those players. And then the last guy on this list is Sam Cooper out of Merrimack. So Sam Cooper is interesting, and he kind of got on the NFL radar when Bill Belichick was checking this guy out. I don't know if he went to his pro day or what that was all about. But he's 6'2", 305 pounds. But a 5'10" 40 time with one of the best 10-yard splits in this class. Actually, the best, let me sort this. Yes, he is tied with Kendrick Green, actually, for the best 10-yard split in this class, which at guard, just offensive line in general, that 10-yard split is probably more valuable, honestly, than the 40-yard dash time, because you're coming out of a three-point stance, a little bit different, but same concept. And how often do offensive linemen run more than 10 yards anyway? So he is tied for the best sort of first step explosiveness or short area, straight line, get to a spot speed in this class. Now, he is undersized. He's the exact same size as Kendrick Green, but he's coming out of Merrimack. So I had very limited tape on this guy. I had some cut-ups from his, it wasn't even the Senior Bowl. He was at like the Shrine Bowl or something. And I saw he has a nice highlight tape on YouTube, and I don't have PFF grades to see like the consistency. So it's a very much a fog of war evaluation, but those cut-up, like he has the traits, and Belichick likes this dude. I'm willing to take a gamble on him as a my guy in the 5th, 6th round. I just think, especially in a wide zone offense, he could play center as well. Kind of similar to Shaq Mason for the Patriots, who Belichick fell in love with as well. Interesting prospect. Very interesting prospect. Nobody's talking about this guy. But Sam Cooper, I do think he gets drafted because of his athletic traits and how strong he is. He had 35 bench reps, but beyond that, he just, like, he puts dudes on their ass. So really interesting prospect. Now we've got my not my guys. These are guys that I'm probably letting someone else draft, or players that I just straight up don't like their game. For the most part, though, it's players that I don't like. I think they could have success, but I think the likelihood of that does not match where the public is talking about these guys. So, again, players that I'm probably letting somebody else draft. And at quarterback, and I've got just less people on this list in general, but there are some guys for sure. So at quarterback, I have KJ Costello, who I just think is, pardon my French, dog shit. Like, he is tall and has an arm. Beyond that, he's fat, slow, and doesn't make reads. It basically comes down to that. And he's wildly inaccurate. People think he potentially could get drafted. He's miserable. He's one of the worst. He has the physical traits, but I think he's out of shape. He's got a strong arm, but I think he's out of shape. And he just doesn't seem like he really cares. He transferred from Stanford to Mississippi State, and he was sloppy. He was really sloppy, and may have gotten benched. I think he got benched at some point in there. But yeah, it was hard to watch, KJ Costello. I mean, he's got a good natural arm. I'll give him that, but God, that's all he has. Running back, I have one player on this list. It's hard to come up with running backs to be a not my guy, because it's like, yeah, I mean, if this guy gets good blocking, he's probably going to be a starting caliber running back, anyone like 1 through 20. But one player that just a lot of guys were asking me about, like, why are you so low on this dude? Jermar Jefferson out of Oregon State. And I compared him to, who did I write on my draft board? Jamal Williams. But to put this in contrast, he's just above Spencer Brown, who we talked about as a my guy, as a 4th to a 5th round grade. But I think he's a good running back. He's James Conner-esque. He's Jamal Williams-esque. He maybe could be like Alexander Madison. But I don't think there's really a punter's shot in hell that he's anything more than a quality, like a high-quality backup type. Because he just isn't very explosive. So that's really what it comes down to. He's tough. He's got contact balance. He can catch the ball. Like, he's a good back. But I just don't get excited about him. And I think you can find his skill set later in the draft. I think I would rather take Spencer Brown in the 7th round than Jermar Jefferson in the 4th. Like, that's a very easy decision for me. They almost have identical size and athletic testing numbers. So that's just where I come in on Jermar Jefferson. It's not that I think he's a bad player, but like what did Jamal Williams get in free agency? Like 2 years, $3 million. He got like 1.5 per year. He was a 5th round pick, and he was fine. Like, he's fine. He's fine. That's all I have on Jermar Jefferson. I just don't get excited about him, and I would not be drafting him where he's probably going to go. Then we got wide receiver. I got 4 guys on my list here. TJ Vasher has like this hive on the internet that are big TJ Vasher fans. He sucks. Like, he's not an NFL prospect. He doesn't run routes. He's slow. He didn't run his 40 time because he knew he was going to run like in the 4.7s, maybe even a 4.8. Good ball skills. He's 6'6". But how many times are we going to do this? He's like a worse version of the dude that came out of Iowa State. Oh, God. What was his name that I was not a fan of him? He's like a tight end for the Eagles now. Let's see if I can... I should know this. Let me... it's Butler. Hakeem Butler. These names always slowly come to me. But he's another Hakeem Butler. We did it with... the Ravens drafted a dude just like him. like 4 years ago. He hasn't done jack squat. It's the guys that you throw on their highlight tape and you're like, oh my God, he's amazing. Look at these 5 catches that the dude made. And then you watch his tape, it's like, this guy cannot set foot on an NFL field. Like, corners just walk with the guy. So TJ Vasher, definitely not my guy. I don't think the NFL is going to draft him all that high. It's more of like, there's a lot of football fans that are big TJ Vasher guy. And he's not a good football player. And then we got Ihmir Smith-Marsette. Does make my list. He's a fun player, but I think he's overhyped. He's very overhyped. He's a good athlete, but you compare Ihmir Smith-Marsette to Blake Prohl, who we talked about earlier. Nobody's talking about Blake Prohl. He's a better athlete. He had better production. He's got better ball skills. He runs better routes. He's just a significantly way more consistent hands. He is light and day better than Ihmir Smith-Marsette out of Iowa, he fits the profile of like a vertical threat. And he's got a chance. You know, I have him a 78 potential grade. Like, I think he could be potentially like a Darius Slayton type. So I don't hate him, but people have him like 3rd, 4th round in like a top 20s, the receivers. He's my 36th ranked receiver. He doesn't have a very good skill set right now. And he's not an elite athlete. His official 40 time was actually less than I thought it would be. He ran a 4.5. Now, he had a good 37-inch vertical, 124 broad jump. He's quick. Like, he's a good athlete, don't get me wrong, but doesn't match the production. So, again, Blake Prohl compared to Ihmir Smith-Marsette, it is not even a conversation. If you need that kind of 6'1", light, speedy vertical threat. Or even then, like, people have him over Austin Watkins, who I think is a much better vertical threat, over Simi Fehoko, Tamorrion Terry. I've seen him over Tamorrion Terry, so no. I'm not matching the hype on Ihmir Smith-Marsette. If he's going where the public has him, you can have him. I'm taking other players. It comes down to that. Even Marquez Stevenson out of Houston, I think, is a better player. Sage Surratt has been not my guy since like December. He's a 6'2", 215-pound tight end. Period. Like he ran a 4.7 40 to like some people's surprise, because at one point people had him as like a top 15 player, and they still do. I'm like in the top 20. He's my 43rd ranked receiver. I have a priority free agent grade on him. I wouldn't touch this guy with a 10-foot pole. He's physical. He's like a shitty version of N'Keal Harry, Sage Surratt. So you got to have athletic traits to play receiver in the NFL, and he doesn't have them. Maybe he can gain 30 pounds and be a 6'2" tight end. I don't know. I really don't know. His brother is a much better prospect than he is. I'll say that. And then Frank Darby, who's at the Senior Bowl. People have asked me why I don't talk about Frank Darby ever. Because what does he do? He's my 62nd out of 74th ranked receiver. TJ Vasher, by the way, 65th out of 74. A 5th-year senior. Let me just read my blurb on Frank Darby. He's a balanced skill set, but there just isn't much there from a traits, skills, production standpoint for a 23-year-old prospect. Darby is a camp body who will need to demonstrate elite work ethic and effort on special teams to buy the time he would need to develop the route running and release that he'll need to become a serviceable player on the field at the next level. It's just not. I don't get it. I don't get it with Frank Darby as like even a draft. Like just the fact that people think he's a draftable prospect. I got 61 better players on my draft board that I would rather take over him. So, good luck to Frank Darby and Sage Surratt, I guess. Then tight end, just 3 guys that honestly what this came down to, I think, was, and I have a hard time saying this without being full of myself, but I kind of believe it. That, you know, these are from consensus rankings, and we'll see how draft night plays out. But I don't know how many draft analysts are going, like, truly getting into the tape on tight ends 15 through 30 like I did, because that's where I found Briley Moore, Jack Stoll, and Zach Davidson. I don't know how many draft nicks are, you know, getting that deep into it. So I'm not trying to, like, say I work harder than other analysts or trying to, you know, do that. I think that's probably how this explains it. But Kenny Ebo, Noah Gray, and Tony Poljan were top 12 tight ends. And Kenny Ebo was like 7th. Because Kenny Ebo is my 12th tight end. And they're players that I'm letting someone else get because I love Bradley Moore, Jack Stoll, and Zach Davidson. If I want a raw freak athlete to develop, I'm taking Zach Davidson over Kenny Ebo, and I can get him later. If I want a blocker, I'm taking Jack Stoll over Tony Poljan out of Central Michigan, who's my 20th tight end. And if I want a potential athletic guy that can get open and develop and be a potential starter, I'm taking Briley Moore out of Kansas State and not Noah Gray out of Duke, who was really underwhelming on tape. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of me being higher on other guys than disliking those players necessarily. But then offensive tackle, I did put Alex Leatherwood on this list because I don't think you can take Alex Leatherwood in the second round, where he's like a top 50 projected player. If you want him to play tackle, I can't justify that. His footwork stink, and it basically comes down to that. I don't like his foot technique at all. And it's a good tackle class. But if the plan is to just straight up make him a guard, I could see it. I think that Leatherwood would be probably guard number 3 for me. I'd probably still go Cleveland and Vera Tucker, but I think Leatherwood would probably be guard number 3 for me. So I could see that. But as a tackle, he's not my guy. As a guard, I like his skill set. It's just a matter of, does he want to do that? Is he willing to do it? Do teams want to do that? It just gets a little more complicated. And then James Hudson made my list. So we talked about Teton Saltez earlier. Let's just put this in comparison to see kind of like my perspective on this thing. So James Hudson has played 1 year at tackle. He converted from defensive tackle to go play tackle at Cincinnati. He transferred away from Michigan. He was good. He was impressive. I don't hate him. I do a 4th to a 5th round grade on him. But Bucky Brooks, for example, has him as a top 5 tackle in this class. What? What the hell are you seeing in James Hudson, who leans, he lacks play strength, he's played 1 year at tackle at Cincinnati, he was not impressive at the Senior Bowl, great athlete, but he did not test well. He tested really poor, actually. He had one of the worst workouts of any top 15 tackle, if not the worst. Now, the tape tells me he's got great athletic traits, but the workout was poor. What the hell do you see in that to say that he's better than, in the conversation with Sewell, Slater, Darrisaw, Tevin Jenkins, and then pick your poison of like Samuel Cosme, Eichenberg, Radunes, Walker Little, Jalen Mayfield, Brady Christensen, even Alex Leatherwood, is not in that same breath as those guys. Even a Spencer Brown out of Northern Iowa, Stone Forsythe, Larry Borum. That's when you start to get in the conversation for James Hudson. But we talked about Teton Saltez. I got to find out how to say that name, because I'm definitely not saying it right, is right behind James Hudson, and they're very similar prospects. Saltez tested better. His tape was better. He's got more experience. He's a much better, physical mindset for the game. Those guys, I'll let you take James Hudson in the 3rd round, and I'll take Teton Saltez in the 6th round. That's my eval on those guys, is looking at it like that. He does have potential though, and I think he could be a good guard or a tackle. But I'm not matching the hype. If he goes in the 2nd round, you can take him. You can have that risk. You can have that project, because that's what he is. He's not going to start for a while. He's got to completely overhaul his technique. Interior offensive lineman, I have Deontay Brown, and kind of similar, I'll give him a chance, but he is in a cluster. So I think he's like the consensus 6th or 7th guard. He's 8th for me, which is fine. But people have him like a 3rd or a 4th round pick. You can have him. I've got 3 players here. Deontay Brown, Sam Cooper, and David Moore out of Grambling are almost identical prospects. We talked about Sam Cooper as a my guy. They're all 6'2". Well, actually, let's take Sam Cooper out of the conversation there because he's a different style. But David Moore, for example, out of Grambling, is to me a better athlete and has all of the same issues as a oversized guard at 6'2" with short arms. David Moore actually his arms are actually 2 inches longer, and his workout was significantly more impressive. Both have some serious issues as far as foot speed and like the technique of playing guard. So you can have Deonte Brown, who kind of stole the show at the Senior Bowl, who played surrounded by elite talent. He played next to, he was on the Alabama line. He was next to Landon Dickerson and all those guys. You can have Deonte Brown. I'm going to take someone else in the 5th or 6th round because that's where I think Deonte Brown goes or should go. And then the other guy here is Aaron Banks, definitely a not my guy. He is my 17th ranked guard out of Notre Dame. He's strong. I'll give him that. He's smart. He's got a lot of experience, but he is in a cluster with other mauling guards that are just not very quick, that can't climb to the next level. He's fine. He could become a starter, but he's in a cluster for me in the 6th round. Just some names like Carson Green, Alaric Jackson. You go down to like Dorian Parker out of Mississippi State. Even further down, Jarrett Hawker out of Texas A&M. There's just a lot of guys very similar to him, and it sounds like he could go 3rd or 4th round. I can't get there with Aaron Banks. He's fine. I would draft him in the 6th, 7th round, but I can't get there with Aaron Banks as a top 10 guard. I saw him as consensus top 10 guard. There's no way. There's no way he's better than the guys on my list. I just don't see it. Maybe he is. Maybe I'm wrong. But I don't know. Okay, there's your my guys, my not my guys. This show is up to 2 hours long. I do have a bunch of Patreon mailbags, so let's just get into it. So if you want to submit questions to the show and you are signed up on Patreon, do it through the direct messages and lead your question with Patreon mailbag so that I can see when I go into the inbox here that that's your goal here is to submit a question for the show. So we're getting a little long. I might whip through these a little bit quicker, but let's go. From Tyler, with all the Mac Jones going 3rd talk to the 49ers, I have to ask, Jones is seen kind of as a low-ceiling quarterback. How does that make him any different from other low-ceiling QBs on their roster like Garoppolo or Rosen? I've kind of covered this. I think it's all a smokescreen. I don't think there's any chance they do. But you're right. He's not even guaranteed to be better than Jimmy Garoppolo. But he's different than Jimmy because he's cheap on a rookie contract and doesn't get injured. And Rosen, you can make a case Rosen's actually more of a low floor player with a higher ceiling. He's got more of the arm talent, but he just doesn't really know what he's doing. But you are right. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I don't think they'll do it. I think they're taking Fields. I think it's all smokescreen. From Nicholas, aside from probably interesting tight end question, very fitting. Aside from probably choosing Adam Troutman, who do you think was the best tight end from last year's draft? Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about that at the beginning of the tight end segment. Troutman was the best rookie. I am very excited to see Bryson Hopkins because he was my number 1 tight end, and he's going to get a role. He's going to get the Gerald Everett role in the Rams offense this year with Matthew Stafford. So I'm excited to see Bryson Hopkins. Cole Kmet was fine. I just don't think he'll be better than Troutman or has a higher upside than Hopkins, but that's a quick look at that. I'm not writing off Bryson Hopkins as my tight end 1. We'll see. Especially if he beefed up a little bit, learned how to block a little better, he could be real nice. From Drew Smith, oh shoot, this was not a Patreon. I got to remember to come back to this. Let's keep that open in a tab. All right, from Matt Sierra. Again, not a mailbag. I got to pay attention here. Just a compliment. Let me respond to this. Say thank you. Oh, that's caps lock. Thank you, Matt. All right, from Dan Hayes. Oh my God, I gotta pay attention. Opening all these questions that are not mailbags. I tell you guys to lead with mailbag questions, so I don't do exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm not holding up my end of the bargain. All right. What does GR and TR mean on the draft board? So those go next to senior or junior. GR means that he was a graduate transfer, meaning he finished 4 years at one school and then came back for a graduate year. I don't understand how NCAA awards that, but sometimes you can go to a different school, you can stay and be a graduate senior. And TR means at some point they took a transfer redshirt year. Usually when you transfer, you have to sit out for a year. So it's just a slight little piece of information which tells you like why they were on their 5th year or 6th year or whatever it is. A little bit of just a little background on their profile. From College Football Guy, who let me take a moment to do a shout out to College Football Guy. He has been doing excellent work on the Xbox old gen roster for my roster, updating the transactions. If you go in there right now, you can get the updated version. So shout out to College Football Guy. But I'm looking to start my own YouTube soon. What editing software would I recommend? I mean, paying up for Adobe to me is a must-have. If you're a college student, you take advantage of the student discount because it's not cheap. It's like $350 for the year. But just in general, getting like even if the YouTube is like a side project, to have the skills to be able to use the Premiere Suite with Photoshop and Premiere, the video editing software, that's going to translate somewhere in your professional career. So I do the Adobe Suite. If you're a college student, you can get it for like $40 a year, which I highly recommend. But those are the softwares I pay up for because it's well worth it. Otherwise, there's free stuff out there. I used to use like Microsoft Paint for my thumbnails, and that was just a huge step below what you can do with Photoshop. From Costa, the Miami trade up to 6 seems like really bad process to me in multiple facets. First off, trading up for a non-QB is generally agreed to be a poor use of value, especially if you're giving up 2 firsts to do so. Secondly, it seems an unnecessary risk to execute the trade so far before the draft. Why wouldn't they wait until draft night to do the trade to get the player they want? If they like multiple players at that spot, what if they fall and they don't have to trade up so high? I agree. Now, it's complicated because it was a 3-team trade. They made a really good move to go down from 3 to 6, assuming they were out on Penei Sewell, which I can't explain why, but they made a really good move to go down from 3 to 6. Like, if you just look at it like that, they got an extra first-round pick. They're going to get who they want anyway at 6. That's great. But how do you know you're going to get what you want, you know? You moved all the way down to 12. And I tend to agree that, like, if the best thing for them was, to me, to end up with Penei Sewell, and they still might get that at 6. We don't know for sure, but there's a lot of reports that they don't like Penei Sewell, that they kind of have PTSD from seeing Isaiah Wilson for a short amount of time, and Penei Sewell has there's reports. I'm not saying they're true or not. I'm just echoing what I'm hearing. There's reports that Penei Sewell isn't all in or something like that. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here based on what could be the case. But if they don't want Penei Sewell, if they don't want anything to do with that, I still think an offensive lineman is the best thing for them. Or Jamar Chase. But they might not be able to get Jamar Chase at this point. We'll see what the Bengals do. So, I don't know. It's very complicated. On one hand, if their goal was, let's get Jamar Chase, let's get another first-round pick and move down, that could very well work out at 6. And they might have inside information that he's going to be there at 6. If that's the case, it's fine. But if they end up taking, I mean, Pitts is interesting, but I've talked about how with Gesicki there, it's not the best use of resources. It'd be fine. I wouldn't hate the pick, but to me, if they take Rashawn Slater at 6 or I don't know, Devontae Smith, then you're wasting a first round pick because you were going to have that talent pool at 12. There's a lot of ways to look at it. I don't have a problem with what they did, but I agree. I don't think moving from 12 to 6 was necessary for them. But I also don't know what they want to do. What's their plan here? Because I don't know if they're guaranteed to get Jamar Chase at 6. And I also think 6 is a little rich for Devontae Smith. So, I don't know. It's very fascinating. Very fascinating. From Jacob, what would be the bigger surprise at this point? Zach Wilson going first or the 49ers not taking a QB? I would say Zach Wilson going first would be a bigger surprise because I think that's a little bit too ballsy for Urban Meyer to come in, who's already kind of a polarizing hire. To come in and not take the obvious choice would be a bigger surprise than the Niners coming up for Kyle Pitts, which is still unlikely, but from Micah, forgive me for the long-ass question as usual, but I really have been pondering a lot. All right, this will be good. Do you think in a class stacked with elite players and depth like this class at receiver and tackle, is it wise to take guys that would be top 5 to 10 picks in previous weaker classes in the mid to late first? Or do you think it's more smart to take advantage of them slipping to comfortably snag your edge or corner in the first while being confirmed you're going to get at least a secondary starter, good option in the second? So, for example, the Raiders are in a perfect spot to get a tackle at 17. That would probably be a top 8 pick in previous years. I see what you're saying. Would you capitalize on a Tevin Jenkins steal or go defense at 17 and get a quality tackle in the second? So as with all these draft strategy questions, it does kind of matter for everyone. So in the Raiders case, I would say right tackle is such a glaring weakness that I don't want to risk that drop-off. And the other thing is, yes, tackle is deep, but these dudes are going to fly off the board. So yes, it's deeper than normal, but I still only have 9 players with second round or earlier grades. And when I go down that list, I think 6 of those 9 are gone in the first. I think Sewell through Cosme are all gone. That's pretty easy to say. And then I think either Eichenberg or Raduns or Mayfield go in the first round. All 3 of those names will be gone in the top 40 picks. And then you got Walker Little, who's maybe going to be there, but Walker Little is not Tevin Jenkins. So I would take Tevin Jenkins because you're not guaranteed, even though it's deep, because all of a sudden you could do that. You could take defense, but then all of a sudden, if you can't get a trade up and these guys start going, you could be looking at all of a sudden you're taking Alex Leatherwood or Spencer Brown or Stone Forsythe, which they're good prospects. They'd probably be second-round picks in older years, but they're still far from the guarantee that, to me, Tevin Jenkins is. So at tackle, I think you if you want to get a starter, a day one starter, you got to have a top 38 pick. I think maybe even higher. Whereas receivers a little different because I think the receivers might get pushed down a little bit further. So if that was your need, maybe you wait on the receiver and go somewhere else. That's kind of what I do with the Packers, for example, is take the corner in the first and then capitalize on a receiver that might be a top 40 pick in a different class. But with the tackles, yes, it's deep, but it doesn't mean those guys ain't flying off the board. That's kind of my perspective on it. All right, from Spencer. Is there any point in drafting Tutu Atwell at any point? Yes. Yes, he's still a draftable prospect. He's tiny, but he's still fast as hell. His official 40 time came up. His official 40 time came up to 4.39, so he cleared the 4.3 threshold. I still have a third to a fourth round grade on Tutu Atwell. He's my 17th receiver. He's still a draftable prospect, yes. You can get him to gain 10 pounds and play close to 170. He's a draftable prospect, yeah. Why do you think the reason... This is another one we kind of answered from Royal Awesome 1. Awesome? Anyway. Why do I think James Robinson slipped through the cracks last year? I kind of talked about it earlier on, but tread on the tires, low level of competition, and a poor testing numbers. He was a 4.6 40 guy. So you look at him and you say, yeah, he was really productive, really good tape, but it's against D2 competition. And I've talked about this before where usually, there's outliers, obviously, but usually when you look at a low-level competition guy, you want to see high-end physical traits. You want to see the testing numbers, or you want to see him look the part. Like, he was really productive, but it was a lot of the same stuff that's working at Jacksonville. Contact balance, toughness, short area acceleration, not necessarily long speed, good receiving ability, and the fact that he's a running back. I mean, not a lot of running backs are valued too highly these days. From Luke, is there any reason why teams in difficult QB situations won't take a chance trading for Gardner Minshew? We seem to get a Gardner Minshew question every podcast, and I agree. I mean, is Minshew a big upgrade to Andy Dalton? Potentially, yes, but the Bears at this point, the football team at this point, I get it. They're going with older veteran options. But the Broncos, what are you doing? The Patriots, what are you doing? Go get Gardner Minshew. He's an upgrade. Well, I think Minshew, Cam in that offense with what he brings as a runner is better, but I think Minshew is a better passer than Cam Newton. Yeah, I'm with you. It's like every show, I'm like, yeah, someone go get Gardner Minshew. Let's see the guy start somewhere. Houston, go get Gardner Minshew. You don't know what Watson... Well, I don't know if they'd trade him in a division, but... I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Gardner Minshew should be starting in the NFL next year. I don't know where, but he's one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Ethan asks, what are your thoughts on DB, Javon Holland, Thomas Graham, the Oregon DBs, basically? Well, Ethan, that's a crafty way to dodge the draft insider package, but because that's all information that's typically available on the draft board. But I'll just give you my rankings, I suppose. So Javon Holland is number 2 safety. Love him. He's climbed over Richie Grant, second round grade. Early second round grade. I'll take him in the top 40. Thomas Graham, excellent slot corner. I was raving about him during the Senior Bowl. And then Diamador Lenore, or however you say his name, good man corner. He's an interesting player. He's my number 28 corner right now, but it's a deep corner class. I've got a 5th round grade on him. I'd like him in a man scheme as a day 3 pick. From Nathan Sangera, the Bengals picked up Thaddeus Moss on waivers. Do I think this will be his best chance to make it in the NFL? Thaddeus Moss's best chance to make it in the NFL is to frickin' stay healthy. That's all it is. Before I found out that the guy just can't stay healthy, he was my number 1 tight end. Blocks his ass off. He's got good speed. He can make good catches. It's just health for him. So if he stays healthy, I'm excited to see him. But it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen at this point. But I understand the buzz around him. He's Randy Moss's son, and he made big plays for a national championship team. But the guy he can't. His lower body just falls apart every time he steps his foot on a football field. So it's sad. But I'm definitely glad I lowered him on my tight end rankings because the guy, he can't stay healthy. From JOR, after last draft, you predicted that teams may begin to lower their value on QBs in the draft as I cited the increase in QB availability. This would decrease the chances teams would trade huge assets to move up for a QB. Do I still think that prediction will happen in the near future? Obviously, it didn't play out this year, but I do still think that it's heading in that direction. What I think it's going to take, to me, is you need I think what would really spark this idea that QBs are becoming more replaceable. I think we're seeing such an uptick in scheming guys open. The offense coordinators are as big of a part as ever. And there's so many playmakers, and the offensive line is getting deeper in the NFL. And when you have surrounding talent like that, it's going to take a team like, let's say, the Eagles 2 years ago or the Rams 2 years ago. And the Rams are a great example. A team with an offensive coordinator, people in place where you can put in someone else and have them succeed. It's going to take a team like that who drafts a guy early and then saying, we don't need this guy. We can draft another dude in the first round or in the second round. We don't need to give the guy $40 million. I think a couple of guys would be like Daniel Jones for the Giants. Like, let's say he's okay, but if the Giants say, and they're not a forward-thinking organization, so I don't think they would be the team to do this, but them saying, look, he's fine. He's a good starting caliber player, but so is Marcus Mariota, who we could have for a third-round pick. So is maybe Andy Dalton. He's not as good as Daniel Jones, but you get the point. Like, Jameis Winston has always been a comp for Daniel Jones because of the turnovers. It would take a team saying, like, yeah, we don't need to pay the quarterback. And then if it worked out for them, which I think it would, I do think that the market could come down, but it's such an old thing. The NFL is a copycat league, but it evolves slowly. So it's obviously that take that teams are going to start to devalue quarterbacks but I do think we started to see it a little bit last year when all those guys were available. Like Jordan Love, to me, should have been, like, if we're talking about Trey Lance as a top 10 pick, Jordan Love in this class to me would have to be, but teams last year weren't looking for quarterbacks if you go down the list. But this year it's kind of changed. So I don't know, I'm kind of rambling and talking out of my butt, but I do think the league is heading in that direction. From Gus, what are the best options for the Vikings at guard in like the third round? Kendrick Green would be a great pick. Great scheme fit with that mobility. I'll go Kendrick Green. Patrick Hill, what is your way too early prediction for the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft? I have not watched them at all. I usually don't answer draft questions for next year, but I guess I'll say Sam Howell from NC State, or from North Carolina. I can't even get his school right. I would say the Oklahoma QB and is it Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati would maybe be like long shots, but from Geometric Heat, is it me or is every position group deep in this year's class? It does seem like a deeper class than normal. I will say that interior offensive line is not so shabby this year, especially like center. It's a rough year if you need a center. It drops off real quick. Interior defensive line is pretty deep, but it's just not a very like exciting class in general. I'm not in love with the edge depth. I think once you get past the second round and like the top 10 edge guys that are all probably going to go pretty early, I don't get too excited about this edge group. But like linebackers deep, corners deep, I still need to go real deep on the safeties to have an answer there. But I will say it's a little bit deeper than I remember. But there's some positions that aren't so good. I mean, tight end's not deep per usual. I think center is rough. Edge is rough as a deep unit. But yeah, it's a deep class. From Ash Soden. Would I ding the Lions more for drafting Slater to play right tackle or drafting Parsons? I don't know if I would ding either of those decisions, to be honest. I think I would like both those picks quite a bit. So I don't think I would ding them hard for either one. I would like either direction for that team. From Lumer Cooper, why is Rousseau dropping in draft stock, and how does he compare to Aguilari? Okay, this is our last mailbag question, so I've got a little bit of a tangent here. People way overvalue like finesse moves from edge rushers. I don't know if it's Madden, where like the only way to get a sack is if you get that spin move animation or whatever. But you look at the top edge guys in the league, they don't usually they're not always just like whipping out crazy like bend and spin moves and club ripping over guys. Like the best pass rushers in the league for the most part dominate with power first. Get off, length, power. Everything else is nice. Now you get your Von Millers of the world, but it's not like Von Miller doesn't have power either. But like Khalil Mack, Myles Garrett, you do have TJ Watt. TJ Watt's a unique player. But like TJ Watt, Von Miller, they're mostly outliers as far as like the top 20 edge players in the league. For the most part, you got to have power. And if you can pull off a spin move or you are bendy around the edge, that's nice, but I'd much rather have the dude that is going to consistently push the pocket and that can get off blocks. And that's Gregory Rousseau, but I think people are always looking for Von Miller. Why are we always looking for Von Miller? We tried to look for Von Miller with Harold Landry. I was guilty of it too. Harold Landry's a good pass rusher. But more often than not, you end up with Tock McKinley, Vic Beasley. Sorry, Falcons fans, that's rough. Harold Landry's been fine, but it's the power to me is the most important thing at the edge position. I think the general community is like, oh my God, his 3-cone sucks. He can't round a corner. That's not his game. He's going to be playing 3-tech half the time. You compare his 3-cone to other defensive tackles, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, he's got a pretty good 3-cone, Gregory Rousseau. He's a straight line dude. He had, by the way, tied for the second best get-off from his 10-yard split. He's got remarkably long, powerful arms. Yeah, he's raw. He doesn't have a lot of great moves. He's young. He's a tape as a freshman. He's still a first-round player to me. People are way overreacting to his lateral agility. That's not his game. It's just not his game. So, I don't know. I get it, kind of. I mean, his tape isn't amazing. I think it's just people are unwilling to take that leap of faith with his technique, I think is the biggest thing with Gregory Rousseau. And then, to me, people saw like an opportunity like on one of his testing scores to just pile on and be like, oh, see, his 3-cone sucks. He sucks. Like, let's do it. Let's pick a random edge player that people like, and let's do that. All right, Azeez Ojulari. 30-inch vertical jump. He's trash. He is not explosive. Kwity Paye. I can't really do it with Kwity Paye. I mean, you could say, oh, he didn't run his shuttle. He didn't run his 3-cone. He doesn't have work ethic. 33-inch arms. Gregory Rousseau's got longer arms. Ojulari's got longer arms. Jalen Phillips has longer arms. Kwity Paye's got 33-inch arms. Not going to work. You can do it for anybody. And I think people love to pile on Gregory Rousseau. Quickness is not his game. I think it's stupid to pile on his 3-cone when he also happened to run a 4.68 at 270 pounds. And the best 10-yard split of anybody in the top 10. Like, people were like, oh my God, his combine sucked. It's the worst combine I've ever seen. And by the way, 21 bench reps seems low, but with his arm length, that's impressive. 21 bench reps. I'm proud of him for doing all the drills. I think that shows his competitive nature for being like, Yeah, I might not have the best 3 cone. It's like DK Metcalf did the same thing as like the ultimate competitor. It's like, I'm going to be super quick. I got long arms. I'm not going to be a great bench dude. But I'm just going to do everything. I'm going to show that I'm a competitor, that the opt-out was a business decision, a family decision. It's not that I didn't want to be out there and improve my game and all this stuff, but I like Gregory Rousseau. He's got to get in the right scheme fit. He's not a perfect prospect, but it was a good little rant to end the podcast. Really fun show. Thank you, everyone who's signed up for the Patreon support lately. It's been just incredible, your support. So I appreciate you so much. I'll probably have a similar show like this next week for the defensive side of the ball, at least with the My Guys, Not My Guys. And make sure you like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Leave a review if you're listening to the audio version. I appreciate all of you hanging out, listening to me talk about football today. And last point, I guess, is set a reminder for draft night. But if you're still with me at hour 2.5 of the podcast, you're probably planning on coming back on draft night. So we'll see you guys there on YouTube. We'll see you guys for the next video, whenever it might be. We'll see you on Patreon. Anyway, I'm blabbering my mouth. Let's get out of here. Peace out. See you later.